It's interesting that in hindsight, whenever we talk about artificial intelligence, people tend to linger on the word intelligence. But
Mm.
when I'm teaching it, I try to linger on the word artificial,
Right,
so people can really understand that, we're not creating a new type of intelligence or
right.
new intelligent beings or entities, but we're actually simulating intelligence artificially when we
Mm.
do these kind of things. And when you can kind of get into that mindset and break out of the mold of what we learn from fantastic sci-fi movies,
Mm.
that the reality is actually a lot more mundane, and that's when we can start really learning how to apply this to make things better.
Mm.
But I mean, there are always going to be people out there applying it to make, like with any technology, applying it to make things worse, and it's mitigating
Right.
that becomes part of the skill. So yeah, so anyway, back to agents, like that tends to evoke, Mr. Anderson
Yes, yes.
from the Matrix, because he was an agent, and I'm like, oh, why do we have to
Yeah,
name
we
it
call them
that? But
agents, of course. I didn't even think of that. Yes, of course, of course.
yeah, so
It's
I should
nerds. The
teach in
problem is
dark
it's nerds
glasses.
naming things.
Oh, it absolutely
This is
is.
why
It
McKay
really
was
is.
never allowed to name anything on Atlantis. Nerds should not be naming things.
Well, did McKay name Gateship? I mean, we
We I
did that whole
tried to
script.
tried to
Yeah.
Gateship one, but no. Apparently, it's a puddle jumper. So yeah,
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah. So
whatever.
we did that whole script, if you remember, with
Oh yeah,
Stargate
that's
AI
right.
around
Yeah, yeah,
Gateship,
yeah.
So that was trying to do a comedy one, which was fun.
So how did you get into all of this? Like, what is the path to becoming? Because you're sort of almost like an AI. I mean, it's become
Agent.
AI, but it was a technologist evangelist, really, aren't you? I mean,
Yeah, so my path to it was kind of interesting. That it actually started in the early 1990s,
mm,
believe it or not. And I graduated, I was in the UK, and I graduated from university with a physics degree and an Irish accent. Into the middle of the biggest like recession that the UK had suffered in many, many, many years, and
right.
my
Okay.
first job was with London Underground, and to the North Americans in the audience, it sounds like a terrorist
Yeah, it
organization,
does
but
sound a
London
bit like yeah,
Underground is it's actually the subway.
yeah.
And I
Fight the
got laid
power.
off.
Yeah.
I got laid off on Christmas Eve,
Oh God,
and
seriously?
of all things, yeah. So Christmas Eve, Merry Christmas, very
Yeah.
very Dickensian, right?
Yeah.
That kind
Yeah.
of things. I'd go home with a lump of coal in your pocket,
Yeah.
and
You
a few
wish the
months
coal could keep you warm.
yeah, there you go. A few months later, the British government was starting up this thing. They had these things called national vocational qualifications,
Mm.
as opposed to academic qualifications. And the idea was they wanted to see if they could do a high tier vocational qualification
Hmm.
in artificial intelligence. 1992.
Wow, good for that. That's some serious because that was
Which
during the AI winter, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I
Oh.
think it was immediately before the AI winter.
Oh, really? All right.
And
So you
yeah,
caused the AI winter as well.
yeah,
Great. Okay.
exactly,
Perfect. Yeah.
exactly. Now you begin to
All
see
right.
a pattern here, and
Yeah.
yeah, and they wanted to try to put together a cohort of 20 people,
Hmm.
to become like advisors to industry around AI, and they
Hmm.
brought us into the England's second city is Birmingham, and they
Yeah.
brought us to. I'm saying that like an American, now, Birmingham, but they call it Birmingham.
Yeah.
So like
Or
England's
just
second city.
Beham on the map because they can't be
Beham,
bothered to write it all
exactly.
out. Yeah. Yeah.
And to kind of teach us AI, but at the time AI was like, I mean, nothing like what you have today. There
I was
was no
gonna say
neural
it's
networks. There
what was it
was
looking like back then?
it was the two programming languages, one called Lisp,
Oh yeah, Lisp. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
designed for list processing,
Yeah.
and if you say it with a lisp, it's really
It's even
difficult.
better. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then another one was called Prologue, which was all
Oh.
around like I'm trying to. I don't even know how to describe Prologue, but naturally this thing failed miserably,
Oh
right?
really?
Because it just wasn't ready. The world wasn't ready for it, and like the industry wasn't caring about people coming in to show them how to do. If you've ever programmed in Lisp, it's like lots of brackets. You'd
Right.
wear out the brackets on your keyboard, and it was a few months later it shut down. But I kind of got bitten by the AI bug.
So
So
you
then
saw
many
the
years.
potential there. Like you were looking at the stuff going like, wait a second.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the clear potential around a new programming model,
Mm-hmm.
because typically, bread and butter of software engineering has always been, here's an abstract problem. Here are rules that you can kind of come up with to fix the problem. And now let's try to express those rules in a programming language to
Mm-hmm.
get a computer to do it. But there's lots of impedance along the way of doing this, and that leads to bugs, and that leads to compromises, and computers can't always do what you want them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the idea behind artificial intelligence and machine learning was to flip that on its head and say, okay, what if we have lots and lots of examples of how to solve this problem?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a computer figure out the rules that kind of match the examples to the solutions.
Right.
That's
Right.
machine learning. And I can
That's
see
where
the potential
that's
of
where the
that.
linear algebra comes in. Is that the
That's the linear algebra and the calculus and all that good stuff comes in.
right?
And I've made it my passion to try and hide that as much as possible.
Right, right. Very good.
Primarily because I can't do it, but don't tell the world that. I was terrible at math.
Oh, me too. Me
Anyway,
too. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
amazed that I love this stuff.
So that big idea sat with me since the 1990s. And then we fast forward to 2016, I think. And I was working at Google at the time on a technology called Firebase.
Yeah.
And
Oh, you were doing Firebase?
yeah,
I just
yeah,
recommended that to a friend for a business that he was starting up.
oh, it's pretty cool.
Well, actually, sorry, I
Nice.
shouldn't say I recommended it. I think actually ChatGPT recommended it, but we'd never heard of it before, and we're all excited because it could do a lot of the stuff that he wanted to do with databases and stuff.
Yeah. Clearly, you never heard of it because I wasn't doing my job anymore. I had moved on to other things.
Exactly. I would have heard
Yeah.
about it if still been working on it. Yeah.
Flex number one. I've actually written a book on it. Shame on you, David. You should read it. No, no, I'm
Really?
kidding.
There's a Firebase book?
Yeah.
You've got a Firebase book?
There is a Firebase book that I wrote. It's probably massively out of date by now, but I'll
That's the
dig out a
problem with
copy and
books,
send
isn't
it to
it?
you.
That's the problem with
Yeah,
books.
and particularly computer books. I mean, they
Yeah.
have a shelf life of like 6 months.
Oh my God,
It's
I
crazy.
used to have so many. I used to do the Sams in 21 days. I used to love those books. Working
They're
through
great
those.
books.
Remember those?
Yeah,
used to
I
love those.
always wanted to write one of those, but they wouldn't let me.
But no, it's probably good you didn't because again, they were so specific to the programming languages that you were dealing with
Yeah,
at that moment. They did an update, and you had to buy
exactly.
another giant freaking Bible sized. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of wanted to do it, teach yourself how to write a 21-day book in 21 days. I mean, that would have been just
That
perfect,
would be
right?
good for dummies. That would be even
For
better.
dummies,
You
yeah,
know? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I say anyway, yes. So I was working on Firebase, and then Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, kind of said, "We're becoming an AI first company, and we're going to train everybody in AI who works at Google." And I was like, "Yay, excited! I'm going to
Yeah.
get back into this thing." And I remember like a friend of mine, her name is Sue, and I were chatting about it, and she was reviewing my Firebase book, and we both got assigned to the same training course. So Sue and I go and we sit inside this like a room with about 300 other Google engineers to learn how to do AI, and we watch a video for about it was 85 minutes, I remember it now, of a guy talking about a calculus.
Oh my
And
God.
you get 300 very, very busy people into a room and you throw calculus at them for like 85 minutes, like after about
How to
60
kill
minutes.
AI in one easy step.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, you've never seen enthusiasm go out of a room so quickly.
Really.
It's just like the balloon popped. And Google being Google, I sent an email to, there's a gentleman called Jeff Dean. If you're in the AI space, you probably have heard of, Jeff Dean.
Mm.
He's one of the most famous people out there in this space. Great guy, fantastic guy.
Mm.
And I just explained, like, look, this is all wrong. And if you want to kind of teach people AI, and particularly software developers AI, you have to do it with code, not with math.
Mm.
And then I still remember the answer, Google being Google, was like, that's a great idea. You do it.
Off you go. Yep.
And here I am,
Right.
so that they gave me the ability to do that. They put me on a team with a former manager of mine, which made me really happy, a guy that I loved.
Mm.
And, with that kind of mission to say, okay, if the world today is very academic when it comes to AI, how do we make it very developer oriented?
Mm.
And, when I did a little bit of research, and at that time there were 300,000 people in the world who could do AI, who were considered AI practitioners,
Mm.
100,000 in the US, 100,000 in China, and 100,000 like kind of spread everywhere else.
Wow.
But the way that they measured them was that their name was on an academic paper. And I'm
Ah.
like, okay, if that's how you're measuring, then it's all wrong.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
thesis was that if there are 30 million software developers, if we can train 10% of them, then there'll be 3 million AI practitioners instead of
Yeah. That's
300,000. And
smart.
Google's thing was always like, how do you 10x? So I said,
Mm.
build this as my strategy. Here's how I 10x. And then the Google of then was really, really good that if you kind of came up with a strategy like that and an idea like that, they would move the world to help you make it happen.
Fantastic.
And that's how I got into the space, helped release TensorFlow to make it very developer oriented, wrote some books on that, did courses, did training, kind of moved it a lot throughout the Google ecosystem. And here we are, so that's kind of
Wow.
how I ended up in this space and ended up meeting up with you again to do the Stargate AI stuff because that was built in TensorFlow and
Yeah, that was
all of that.
TensorFlow, and it was early. It was early days, wasn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
there wasn't like Chat GPTs and
Yeah.
things around at the time.
Yeah, there wasn't chat GPTs. And so there was a technology called LSTM, long short-term memory. Another one of those terms that'll scare
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
And I had already been doing generative AI with LSTMs in my
right.
courses. And, if you'd taken any of my courses, you would have done like Irish drinking songs you would have built a generator that created Irish drinking songs.
Is that on your
So,
Coursera? Because
yeah.
I started your Coursera, that I got distracted, and I want to come back to it because I've now got like I got the annual membership, and I'm like finishing up all these courses that
Oh,
I've
nice.
started
Yeah.
now. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's in the NLP course,
Okay.
natural
All
language
right. Yeah.
processing
Yeah.
course
Yeah.
in
Okay.
there. So then when Brad and I started ideating to do the Stargate AI stuff, it
Mm.
was like I started with that and it wasn't very good. But there is it's an algorithm, I don't know, a model design called Transformers,
Yeah. Yeah.
just to confuse
Again, a
things even
term
further.
that has
Yeah,
is just that just sounded
you know.
cool.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's descriptive of what it does.
Mm.
But I still remember, like, saying, I think I'm going to do this with Transformers.
Mm.
And then Brad was like, no, that's a whole different franchise.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because of course, yeah.
You're
And so,
talking to
but the,
Hollywood, Lawrence.
yeah, yeah,
So you got to be careful.
and then the idea behind transformers is like much more effective for language and particularly for language generation, because the
Mm.
idea of a transformer is that if you teach it based on a whole bunch of text, what it does is it learns the transformations that move one piece of text to another piece of text. Like
Mm.
if I say, if you're happy and you know it,
Clap your
you
hands.
say
Yeah.
clap your hands,
Yeah.
right? So and it's mimicking what's going on in your brain,
Mm.
because you've transformed if you're happy and you know it into clap your hands in your
Mm.
brain.
Is
So
that
the
how we
idea that's
work? Do you think? I mean, do you get the sense that that we do the same thing? Are we constantly looking for is our brain behind the scenes? Do you think looking for the next word?
partially, yes, I
Because I
think
feel
so.
that sometimes. A lot of the
You know,
time, in fact.
yeah.
As
Well,
I get
you,
older,
you
I find
definitely
that looking for the word becomes a longer process. Yeah.
yeah, you definitely feel it when you can't find the word, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like,
Not so
but
transparent then. Yeah.
yeah. So then I ended up kind of building a transformer and training a transformer. Well, actually, I built a whole bunch of transformers and training them on the Stargate scripts, because
Yeah.
the body was quite small. I mean, 300 scripts is a lot for a TV show, but
Mm.
it's not a lot when you think about the body of text on the internet.
Right. Right.
But the nice little innovation that we did was, like, for example, like for McKay, for your character,
Mm.
we trained a transformer that, if you think about the character as a living person in a space in a show that's fictitious, but
Mm.
the script, it's just words on a page.
Mm.
So the words on the page, like, there's action scenes and there's dialogue. So it's like the way that McKay would respond to somebody else talking to him
Mm.
would be very different from the way that he would respond, or the words on the page would follow words on the page from an action sequence,
Right.
right?
Right.
So if the action sequence was, the gate ship explodes,
Mm.
what would McKay say,
Right.
or if the action sequence was somebody, or the words immediately prior to that were like somebody said hello McKay, then
Mm.
he would respond differently. So
Right.
the
Right.
idea was like to build a whole bunch of transformers to say, okay, McKay transformer for responding to action scene description, McKay
Mm.
transformer for responding to somebody talking to him, and then
Mm.
another McKay transformer for when continuing his dialogue,
Right.
right? So the first
He
thing that
doesn't
McKay
stop.
says
Yeah.
is followed by the second thing that McKay says, and then that would be
Mm.
different. So I ended up like training like this. And another term you're going to love, I ended up training a swarm of
Wow.
transformers,
Okay.
a
All right. A
swarm
swarm
of
of transformers. You're
transformers.
true. This is like. Please call us Skynet. I mean, like, oh my God. Okay.
you
Yeah.
know well, I'll get back to Skynet in a moment, but
Yeah.
but that was the whole idea, to train the swarm of transformers and then
Mm.
just throw them in like with a prompt and see what starts happening and start cherry picking stuff and putting that together into a script.
And the
So the
model does
T
all of its own little basic. It does all of the turning of the knobs and stuff, like basically to get to the right answers.
Sort of, yeah. So the idea is like, for example, if I wrote a little prompt and then just say, okay, let's see how McKay would respond to this, right? So
Mm.
the,
Mm.
or
Badly.
no,
Badly. I can tell you
no,
that now. Yeah.
it's math. Or, no, let me change that. So say there's an action description,
Mm.
and then I put all of the characters, and then I
Mm.
would look at what the characters would respond. But the response from the characters also had a mathematical weight associated with
Mm.
it.
Mm.
So then I'd say, okay, by rule, I will pick the one with the strongest weight.
Right.
So it's kind of like saying that's the character who had the strongest, most accurate text in response to the previous text,
Mm.
and then throw that into the script.
Is it
And now
easier
I
with
have an
more
action
extreme characters?
description.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yep.
No, it's okay. It was easier with characters who had more things that they had said. So the ones that
Right.
had the most lines of dialogue ended up being the ones that were easiest. So like very verbose people like me and you and McKay, that kind of stuff would end up like actually I think getting better dialogue than the ones that were,
Interesting.
that weren't. So,
I would
but
argue
yeah,
that's
it
the
was.
same thing for humans as well, though, because I mean that
I
was the
think so.
I had the because I had the nerds writing for me because
Right.
I got to personify a lot of the Brads and Rob
Right.
Coopers in that. But it was fascinating because it was, as you say, it wasn't good to start. It was
No, it was
not
terrible.
convincing at first.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It was really bad to start with, and it was
it
the
was
the version
hilarious.
one.
It was
Oh, it was
fun.
great.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, to be clear, version one uses the LSTMs that I was talking about. Was
Right.
version two when I changed it to Transformers? Then it started getting really, really
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
And so that the T in Transformers is the T in GPT. So
Right,
ChatGPT is generative pre-trained transformers.
right.
So just to your point of like we were doing all of this before ChatGPT because
Mm.
the algorithm or the design of a transformer existed, and OpenAI took that and trained it on masses of text from the internet in order to
Mm.
create
So
GPT.
we were before
Um,
GP rather than GPT.
yeah.
So,
No,
yeah.
we were still generative pre-trained transformers, but
Oh,
we were just generative pre-trained transformers on Stargate text rather than
right,
on the
right,
entire
right, right.
internet.
Is
So
that similar to what they're doing now with these? Is it called RAG, where you give it a specific thing to work on?
yes. So RAG is like an enhancement to it. So the idea behind RAG, and I best explain this with an example, is I wrote a sci-fi book in 2014 called Space Cadets. And Space Cadets was published by a real publisher, not self-published, who went bust 6 months after they published
Uh,
my book. No correlation, at least I hope not. And
the AI
but
winter, the death
yeah,
of
there you go.
publishing. Yeah,
You're seeing a pattern here, aren't you?
this
Yeah.
podcast is
So
doomed.
I am chaos.
No, we talked to him. We
But
talked to a guy who specializes in chaos. So yeah.
and so uh, so because it became an obscure book, it wasn't in the training set for something like GPT or Gemini or Claude or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. So if you ask them about this book or about the characters in it, at best they're like, I don't know, and
Right,
at worst they're hallucinating and making stuff up.
right, right.
So the idea behind RAG would be, I'm going to pick one of the characters in the book to make it even more obscure, is
Mm.
a teenage girl from North Korea.
Okay.
Whose name is Sookyung Kim. And if you, for example, like ask any of the GPT engines about her, it's like no clue,
Yeah.
or they'll hallucinate, like I said.
Right.
But with RAG, the idea is like I can get the book and I can slice the book up into little chunks,
Mm.
right? Like of maybe 100-word chunks, stick them in a database, and then you can create a vector of the words of those databases. And here's where we get all mathy. But there are higher dimension vectors called embeddings
Mm.
that, just think of it as a numerical representation of the sentiment of those words.
Okay.
So now the idea is like if I go to like a chatbot and ask about this character, well, what you're going to do is like I've written some words. Tell me about Sookyung Kim, from Space Cadets, and like her name is in there. So now I can pull the sentiment out of that and I can compare it with all the chunks of the book and
Mm.
find, say, the 10 pieces of the book that are closest in sentiment to that,
Mm.
and then add them to the prompt that goes to ChatGPT
Mm.
in a hidden way. So those chunks that are coming from the book might be like in the book, she says the name of her hometown. She says her favorite food. There are values that she has that she talks about with other characters and things like that.
Mm.
So then when this prompt is going to ChatGPT, it's not just tell me about Sookyung Kim. It's also got all this other stuff. And ChatGPT does know about that other stuff. Like
Right.
her
Because you
favorite
can
food is
look that
black
up.
bean
Right. Right.
noodles.
Okay.
Yeah. It does know her hometown. She has conservative values and stuff like this.
Mm.
So then when ChatGPT sends something back, now it's actually a really intelligent opinion about her
Mm.
rather than, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what RAG is all about. It's kind of cheating, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of
That's
like
great.
giving it stuff that it will know about along with the stuff that it doesn't know about to kind of prime it to give it a better chance of giving a good answer.
But that also makes sense, though, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that I've learned is that the more you know about a subject and the terminology within that subject, the better the easier it is to find what you're looking for about that subject, right?
Exactly. And there's a subtle thing that happening here when you do it this way that I think is really important. And that is you're not treating the back-end engine, like I'll use ChatGPT as an example. You're not treating that as an expert in the subject, but you're
Mm.
treating it as an understanding engine,
Hmm.
right? So you're giving it a whole bunch of text and you're asking it to understand it on your behalf.
Mm.
And that is, I think, is the real power with large language models like this, is like, instead of treating them as databases or as knowledge sources, that, it's a case of, wow, now if it can understand stuff on my behalf and help me create that and help me create new things from that, or parse that, or that kind of thing. That's when we start unlocking, I think, the real power of these things that we can all really, really, really benefit from. And it's, I coined a term for this that it hasn't really taken on, but I call it artificial understanding, right? Because, it's
AU.
AU,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's also the term for gold, right? So it's
Oh,
golden,
nice,
that kind
nice.
of thing.
There's
Yes,
gold in
artificial.
there. Yeah, very
There's gold
good.
in them there
Why,
hills,
this hasn't caught on? Come on.
No, I know. It's
Yeah.
like I'm very obviously not very good at my job. So
You gotta,
but
you gotta get some more self promotion out there.
yeah, exactly. Oh, David, can you help me with that? No.
Oh God, yeah. I'm afraid I'm terrible at it too.
but so I really see, like, and I do advise like a lot of startups and stuff like that, and it's like, that's one of the things that, to start really thinking about it, to kind of get out of the realm of ChatGPT is this magical pixie dust that can help you solve problems, and more into the case of, like, you remove that top layer and you look underneath the hood, where it's like an artificial understanding engine, and then some of the things that some of the scenarios that you can open up, and interesting things that you can do, and then also thinking about the path towards beyond AI to like AGI and ASI. I think that's part of the
ASI?
key. Artificial superintelligence.
Oh, okay. Right, very good. Right.
So a bit like you.
Yeah, more the artificial for that than I think.
You're catching on.
Yeah,
Nice. Yeah. Definitely me too. So, but yeah, I think that's really the, I find the interesting thing, and it's one thing I would like to say, anybody who's like looking into this stuff, it's all very nice to kind of use your ChatGPT or your Gemini or your Claude or anything like that to help you with surface level tasks, but you're really literally only scratching the surface when you do that, and when you can to think about it as this engine that helps you understand stuff, and then to start understanding stuff at scale, and from that understanding of stuff to build new stuff is really where it gets very interesting.
I don't think I could do this. I'm a genius without using AI, because you can't possibly read and understand every research paper on the subject that you're looking into, but AI can help organize it and pull what you need from it. Right. Again, everyone always says, that it's not going to be replaced by AI. It's working with AI is the key. And for me, it's just made things possible that I just would not be. I mean, the number of unfinished programs I had, little scripts and things, just because the syntax was difficult.
Right.
It's completely now. If I. It used to be that I was like, cut and paste. I'm only have to do it like once, so I'll do this 100 of these. Now it's like Python done, automated.
Yep.
I mean,
yeah, and I think when you start thinking about like how you can start using those tooling in ways that you normally, step one is scaling what you could probably have done yourself, but taking a shortcut towards doing it. Like, instead of spending 6 months learning all the ins and outs of Python, so you know really, really good at Python, spend 1 month learning Python, and then using this as a scale engine so that you can, it can point you in the directions that you need to go in. And then with the understanding that you already have of Python, to be able to do them better. So you're, reducing the cognitive load on yourself to learn things so that you can still be effective with them. I think it's amazing, and it's a great way of scaling that people are doing. But then I would encourage step two with this then is, if you are already doing a thing, to have it understand that thing alongside you, almost like a person sitting beside you that you can bounce ideas off of.
So have it listen to the podcasts potentially, and then offer suggestions for the future.
Yeah, like, I mean, I'll go by, for example, I've been writing a fiction book. I just finished writing it, called Memories of the Future. And it's a really it involves time travel, so it's really, really twisted. And the process that I spoke about earlier on with RAG, I as I was writing the book, I was ragging on the book
Ha.
so that I built a chatbot that I could like, bounce ideas off of,
Mm.
and the protagonist, by the way, right now, his name is David.
I love it
Total
already.
coincidence.
Yep.
So
Yep.
and like
I will
David,
be
like,
I will be available for the film when
okay,
yep, yep,
absolutely.
yep.
Actually, it was you were doing a thing in Winnipeg like a couple of years ago, and
Yeah.
we were chatting, like you were making the film, and I
Yeah.
was like, and I kind of bounced the idea of the time travel story off you. That's what I've turned into the book.
Oh, great.
That's what the name David kind of came across into it, and but like when it's very, very twisted, and without going into too many spoilers, the thesis that this is based on is kind of time travel forks the universe.
Hmm.
So if you travel back in time and you make a different decision, turn left, turn right, in the Doctor Who side, you end up fork.
Hmm.
And then there's all of the implications of all these forks and all of the things that can happen from them. But
Interesting.
trying to keep that straight in your head when you're writing a book is really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I did a rag on this kind of thing as I was doing it, and I had a GPT understand the book on my behalf, then I could
Hmm.
ask, like, I want David to do this. Would that make sense?
Have
Is
I
that the right
broken the
motivation?
timeline? Yeah. Have I broken my
You know,
rules? Yeah.
yeah, but even like motivation,
Hmm.
a minor
Really?
spoiler is the book begins before time travel is invented, and a
Hmm.
time traveler comes back
Ha.
from a place where time travel had been invented, and
Right.
there's a different David in that future who's nothing like the David of the present.
Ha.
But the idea of time travel changed the David, and she wants to unchange him. But then it's like, well, what would the motivations of this person be? And he
Hmm.
doesn't actually exist yet.
Right.
And trying to get your head around all of this kind of stuff. But then I could build a chatbot and start ragging, with that chatbot and like asking it questions and like, what if I had David do this? And it could come back and go, nah, that's not a good idea.
Hmm.
And it's
Interesting.
like, so it was understanding my story on my behalf and giving me something that I could converse with to help me write a better story.
But is that still a glorified spell checker? I mean, is that still a glorified? Is it still just predicting what it thinks you want next, or
Um,
obviously, even if it is, it's obviously helpful. But I'm just
yeah,
curious to know if
I think
it's changed.
I think yes and no.
Mm.
Yes, in that ultimately it's a glorified next token predictor.
Yeah.
But how glorified then becomes the question, right? So
Right.
when we
Right.
say something is a glorified next token predictor, we tend to play it down to be just like it's predicting next tokens.
Right.
But that level of glorification can be, well, how valuable are those next tokens?
Right.
And I
Right.
think that was the idea behind this, was that then when I was creating it was, okay, and there's the thing you can do with large language models that's kind of crazy, where I call it priming them,
Mhm.
where it's like, you can say, you are an expert in storytelling
Right.
and in
Right.
understanding character motivations and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. All, to put together a system prompt like that and then
Mm.
start ragging on it. So it's almost like role playing with me,
That Lance
that
has been
it's
doing that. Lance has been doing
yeah,
that
yeah.
with he's got a a spicy AI that he's talking to now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's wow. Okay, so you get into this. You're working. You're working with Google. You worked with Microsoft as well. I think, is that
I
right?
did, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, I did,
Um,
for my sins. No,
and so,
just kidding.
but now you're at ARM. And what is
Now I'm
the?
an arm.
Maybe you can explain to people just what ARM is and what you're doing there.
Yeah, yeah. So ARM is
He says laughing already. He's already laughing. They're already laughing.
I'm laughing because there's a word I'm going to say in a moment
Okay.
that's going to make you laugh.
Okay.
But so there's not. I mean, there's a lot of things that I can't talk about right now.
You're not working on
But
Stargate.
I am working on
Oh my
Stargate.
God! Oh my God! That's fantastic. I sort of in the back of my mind I kept thinking like he's. I guarantee you Lawrence is going in there. Lawrence
Yeah.
is stepping into the Stargate. Sorry, I should
Yeah.
let you finish because people will need to know
No,
what that is. Yeah.
and that's why I can't really talk too much about the
Right.
specifics of
Right.
that. But I mean, I think,
Obviously.
but the joke that I have is like, I think I'm the only person in the world to have worked on both Stargate AIs,
Yeah, there you go.
right?
I want to be the
So
second. I think you need wheel me in as like I need to wheel in as a mascot or something for the new Stargate AI or
I would
something.
love
But
to.
yeah.
Yeah, when it was announced, like the Stargate AI thing, my wife was at a hospital appointment that was taking hours. I couldn't find parking. So I was sitting in my car outside, and Brad and I started texting, and I was like joking, like, did you see the Stargate AI announcements? And like, I'm working in that, and it's the Brad, I keep saying it's Brad Wright.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I mention Brad, people think Brad Pitt. Sorry, Brad, but it's Brad
Oh,
Wright.
yeah.
And it's
I mean, he's a great guy, but he's no Brad Pitt,
Yeah. and it was like, it's like, yeah, and it was like the joke that, hey, I think I'm the only person working on both Stargate AIs. And Brad was like, I want a tour.
Yeah, yeah, no
So I have
kidding.
to arrange
Yeah,
that.
we
So
want
yeah,
in.
for sure. Yeah. But anyway, I think what I'm doing is there's a lot of changes happening in how AI is being built. I think you can read between the lines of like the public announcements of like, things like new chips being created, data centers being built in particular. And I think
Huge data centers.
The big thing with the Stargate AI, at least in the first wave, was there are massive data centers being built or currently exist for training models. But for the rest of us who use models, it's very clear that there are constraints. You've probably seen outages in GPT, and you've seen outages in Claude and Gemini and stuff like that, because the demand and the supply isn't meeting the demand. So I think the first wave of that is to build new data centers to be able to handle the load of people wanting to use these things. I think that would be part one. And then part two is when we look at how AI is built today, a lot of the acceleration of AI is using GPUs.
Right.
And GPU, the G stands for graphics.
Yeah.
And graphics have got nothing to do with this. And
just
GPUs
multiplication and addition, right? It's just good at that, right? Isn't that
it's two things. It's matrix multiplication and it's floating point operations. When you're building 3D graphics games or graphics intensive stuff, that you need lots of little cores to be able to do that really, really fast. And by some staggering coincidence, AI is the same thing. To be able to do machine learning, it's the matrix multiplication, floating point ops. And so GPUs have generally been very, very good at that. And they've kind of been the vanguard of the industry leading that. But
and made them very expensive. For us gamers.
Yeah. Between Bitcoin mining and
oh my God,
AI, kind of drove up the price. Absolutely. But the industry doesn't necessarily need to use GPUs to be able to do that. That there are many, many ways that machine learning can be done, and so there are lots of different methods of creating new types of chips. Like at Google, we worked on things called TPUs, which were tensor processing units.
Yeah, I think I have a couple. I have a couple in the garage, I believe.
Yep. So I think I sent you some mini TPUs.
Yeah. There's some fun little projects you could do with that. Yeah.
Totally. If they still work, I don't know.
I should try them. Yeah.
You really should.
They've got the software though, right? They've got the software still being.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Give it a try. Let me know if it works.
Okay.
And so there are lots of folks like working in novel chip design to be able to do new types of chips that might
it's
be
also
faster,
access to memory too, isn't it? They need to get the direct connection to large pools of memory is helpful as well, isn't it?
Exactly. So if we go back to Transformers, like if you think about how Transformers work, is that they're just trying to figure out the patterns between large masses of text. I said, if you're happy and you know it, and you say, clap your hands.
Because I'm a trained monkey.
Because you're a trained monkey like the rest of us. And, but that's an easy one, right? Or if I say it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Is an easy one,
yes.
But, if you then think of just a general piece of text that maybe doesn't exist anywhere, like,
today
tell me about Soo-Kyung Kim.
Right.
That kind of thing. Then it's suddenly there's all of this calculation that it needs to do to figure out, going back to embeddings that I was talking about, to find pieces of text that it has learned from that are similar to that, and then pieces that map to that, and then decoding them, that you got to have all of this stuff quickly accessible. And that's what memory in computer, if you think about it, again, it's a terribly named thing, but memory in a computer is data that you can access as fast as possible. Right. So data on your hard drive is going to be slower, data on another computer is going to be even slower, that kind of stuff. But data in memory is the fastest possible. So fast access to memory, fast memory, all of these kind of things then will make when you need those masses of data to do those calculations, makes it a lot easier to do so. So
Right.
there's lots of work being done in those spaces. My part is I'm really thinking in terms of, okay, the person who's building the either training the AI of tomorrow, or who is like running inference on the AI of tomorrow, how do I make their job easier?
Right.
How do I design a stack, that makes their job easier?
By
How do
stack, what
I
do you mean
kind
by
of
stack? What's
Oh, so stack, yeah, sorry. Stack is like, when you have a bunch of technologies all sitting on top of each other,
right? Okay.
right? For example, today you're using a Mac for your podcasts, and then on top of that is the operating system, Mac
Right.
OS. And then on top of that are some drivers for like your camera and your
Right.
microphone. And then
Right.
on top of that is some software. So they're all stacked,
It's my
right?
Mac
And
stack. Yeah. Okay.
your
All
Mac
right.
stack,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So it's like, then so when you're doing AI, there's generally a stack, right? There's
Okay.
the
Right.
accelerator chip, there's the drivers for that chip, there's the PyTorch type things, or TensorFlow type things, there's the applications on top of that. And how do you design that to make it, to think about, okay, what are the things what people find difficult today, even experts find difficult today, and
Mm.
how can you build shortcuts into that? How can you build different workflows and that kind of thing? So
And is it feeding
that's my role.
itself? Is it like is the I'm assuming that the AI is also helping you to make things easier to deal with the AI? Is that
Uh, yes
no?
and
Not really.
no.
No. Oh, okay. All right.
Not really, at least not yet.
Mm.
I mean, at some point, there is research that I've been looking into. There's a thing called Triton, and so Triton, if you think about it, is if you're developing AI, you're writing in Python with something
Mm.
like PyTorch. But Python, again, is not optimized for a specific chip. Triton is a language which is Python-like, that is much lower level. It's
Ah.
kind of like writing in machine code.
Oh, really?
And so Python, so that this is, instead of dealing with like neuron or convolution or something, you're dealing with matrix multiplication and floating point
Oh,
operations, and
wow. Okay.
things like Hessians and Jacobians, which to me sound like medieval armies,
Yeah, it does
but that's
rather.
not,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so the idea there is, that's very difficult to do. It's a very specialized skill, but that's the kind of thing that maybe with AI generation, and there are some companies out there who are already doing that, to say, okay, instead of me going back to what we were talking about earlier, instead of me needing to spend 6 months to learn Triton kernels
Mm.
to be able to be effective at writing or designing in Triton, I can maybe spend a month learning it and then use AI assistants to
Right.
build some for me that I can then pull apart and see what works and what doesn't
Mm.
work in order to be better. So little things like that, I can see it, but beyond that, not really.
It's almost like a knowledge prosthetic, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit like
Yeah,
it feels like we are, we're trying to sip out of a fire hose of information. The amount of data being put out on a daily basis in just raw format, or even in the format of like of research papers and stuff. It's too much. You can't physically, there aren't enough hours in your lifetime to get through all of this stuff. We need tools to help us process this stuff. So I feel like we are disabled because by the very nature of just being
yeah,
human, and that these technologies are the sort of are the interface that's allowing us to
yeah,
make
yeah.
connections we couldn't do before.
And wouldn't it be great if you had an artificial understanding engine that could understand that stuff on your behalf, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Is
And
the
help you
idea
get to
behind it.
what you need to know. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
one of the things I love about using it for myself is as someone who didn't have a formal education, I don't know where the holes are. So
mm,
I always start with the like explain it to me like I'm in grade 8, and then I can work from there, knowing that I've got the basics from it,
yep, yep,
or at least a certain understanding of it. But also just the natural language side of it, being able
yeah,
to say I want this program instead of like how do I instead of cutting and pasting and looking for all that stuff. It's just
yep.
that is a very exciting future to me.
I think it is, and I would say that your approach is exactly the right way, because that, and it's one of the things that's actually very difficult when you work in the industry, is
Mm.
that there was a lot of people who've spent many years doing research projects, writing papers, and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And then if you're like, well, if you explain it like I'm five,
Mm.
that it's almost offensive.
Yeah, yeah.
But
No, I can
with
understand.
things,
I can understand that.
and I would say the greatest friction I've had in my career in
Mm.
AI has been, when I'm trying to scale beyond myself and get other people to educate and inspire and inform in the same way, to
Mm.
kind of like say, you really have to explain it to people like they're five.
Mm.
The people outside the industry will not be offended for the most part if you do
Mm.
that, because that's what they want and that's what they need.
Mm.
But then somebody who's PhD, many years and all that kind of stuff, and you're asking them to dumb it down, they get offended. And I think that was the hardest part. I mean, I'm thick-skinned. I don't mind dumbing it down for myself.
I'm an
You
actor.
know,
Yeah, yeah, same thing.
you know,
Yeah,
and so it's like, I think that approach that you have is exactly the right one, because I think when people bring an ego into it, you're already shields up on trying to learn something new. And so it's like, that I'd say forgo any ego, forgo anything that you have, or any, what was it Yoda said, unlearn, what you already know, or something like that. And it kind of leaves you as a sponge to be able to open up and learn new things now more than ever, when things are coming thick and fast. It is so hard to keep up with all the new stuff. And I think
how do you keep
does
up?
require that. If I do, to be honest.
How do you have time? But do you have sources of, like, are there places you go? Are there people or I mean,
I think
I never know who to watch.
Yeah, over time I've become calloused enough from reading stuff that was nonsense that I've trained a little model in my mind. That when I see a new thing, to be able to filter it out, to go, I'm not going to waste any time on that. And then to at least have that initial filter. And then for the stuff that I do need to spend some time on, finding time to do that is difficult. But at least, it's maybe 10% of the fire hose is the thing that's of interest to me. And maybe if I get to read half of that and understand half of that, then at least I'm doing pretty well.
Right.
But it is trying to keep up is very, very difficult. But I think over time you do tend to spot the patterns of nonsense.
There's a crypto bro kind of quality to some of this stuff now, which I find very frustrating.
Absolutely. And I go even further than that, where, I liken it to, there are a number of people out there that they will benefit from hype.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the chief ways that you benefit from hype nowadays is harvesting likes and harvesting influence. And I liken it to, remember there was a craze like years ago where teenagers would put Tide Pods in their mouth.
Oh God, yeah.
Right. And it was like,
I lived in fear that my kid was going to be the one coming home with like,
exactly. And in some ways the AI industry is like that, where there are people out there saying, put Tide Pods in your mouth, and then they're harvesting influence as a result. And then there are business decision makers who are seeing this massive influencer is telling me to put Tide Pods in my mouth, and this less important person that nobody is liking or sharing is saying, don't put Tide Pods in your mouth, and as a result, they're making the decision to put Tide Pods in their mouth and making bad business decisions and bringing down the industry. So it's like over time, like, you as a parent learn that you don't put Tide Pods in your mouth and you worry that your kid is going to do the same thing. And that's the kind of calluses I'm talking about. So when you see like a lot of this stuff being thrown out there, like particularly with generative AI, there was one that I've been picking on a lot recently, where there was an individual back in January spoke about how he laid off his entire marketing department and replaced it with ChatGPT and went massively viral. And I'm like, this is the equivalent of somebody saying put a Tide Pod in your mouth and going massively viral, and people thinking it's a good thing because it's viral, rather than looking at the subject matter. And so I think that's one way that you can stay ahead, is by having those calluses and like realize.
I definitely see a lot of that.
You don't want to do.
I listen to a lot of the what I call business porn, where it's just all these podcasts about how to make money and side hustles and all this kind of stuff. And there's definitely a certain type of person who I just stop the podcast, because I just go like, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't. I think there's always, look, I very, very much worry about AI because of what I've saw happening with the crypto world. Because I worry that the tech bros will get in on this and will start, and the film industry is another place where I'm seeing a lot of sort of what I would call the snake oil salesman coming out. But I was this is very selfish, because obviously very specific to my own stuff. But I am curious to know what where you think things are going from a film and TV standpoint, because that does seem quite disruptive to me.
It does, and it's a great example of like how the snake oil salesmen have driven the narrative, because the narrative was, and it still is in many quarters, that you don't need writers anymore. Somebody can just go to ChatGPT and say, write a movie about a time traveler, that kind of stuff, and boom, suddenly it spits out a perfectly formatted script with a well-told story. And we and I both know that that's not the truth.
Great grammar, no soul. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but even then, no structure, no actual coherence, anything like that beyond the first few pages. And
Mm.
so the whole idea there is that led people to be really, really afraid of this kind of stuff, and that led to various strikes and still various issues going on in
There
the
is a
industry.
hatred for it in
Massive.
some areas of the film industry for sure. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely massive. And so it's like, and if there is a fear of the thing, the things that people are afraid of aren't the things that they should be afraid of,
Right. Right.
because of the snake oil salesman and the like. So I think that's part one. But let me turn to a more positive side of it. And I think part two here could be, um, I think there's a lot of wastes in any industry. And I think the movie industry is a great example of that.
Huge example of it. Yeah.
And
My
one of
wife
the
is
things that
obsessed with sustainability because of this. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, one of the things that I've learned about, because I've been working with Hollywood folks, I have a movie that I've written that's in permanent pre-production. But one
Welcome
thing
to
that I
Hollywood,
learned
kid.
about, yeah, I'm not, the dream is over. No, no,
Uh,
maybe not. We'll see. But the interesting thing here was though that what I learned about, particularly how movies are financed.
mm,
And if you're not a Disney or you're not, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but if you're not a Disney or a Warner Brothers who can self-finance, then you need to borrow money to make movies.
mm,
And then like borrowing money, like borrowing for anything like to buy a house or a car or anything involves a certain amount of risk.
mm.
So how do you spread that risk?
Right. Right.
And then one of the ways that one of the studios that I was working with was like, they just say that, well, they try to sell the overseas rights to the movie.
Mm,
And if they have a budget in mind for the movie and the overseas rights sell for 50% of the budget,
mm.
if they add up all the different countries that they sell it to, now they can go back to the financiers and go, this has a pretty high likelihood of
Right.
success,
Right.
and be able to borrow money. But how do you sell it overseas? Well,
Mm,
there's the thing, is like you hire the director, you shoot a sizzle reel, you hire a writer, you write the script,
mm,
and on average, it can cost like $1 to $2 million to actually put together the pitch to
mm,
sell it overseas. So
mm.
you're taking on that huge risk
Yeah.
in order to do that. And I think it was a 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 actually sell.
Right.
So I'm going to say
I'm
one in
amazed it's
10.
that high, to be honest.
Right. So I'm going to say 1 in 10.
Okay.
Right. So now you've invested $20 million on 10 pitches,
Yeah.
one of which will succeed.
Mm,
Right. So that kind of thing. So you've so think of all that waste.
mm,
And like think about all of the jobs that are at risk and those kind of things because of that waste.
mm,
So now it's a case of, well, if you could reduce that, and you say it might be higher than 1 in 10, but if you could reduce that to 1 in 2 or 1 in 3
yeah.
with really good predictive analytics and really
Mm,
good artificial understanding, of like what sells in China, what sells in Japan, what
mm,
sells in Europe, what sells in Africa, and putting together a pitch and understanding ahead of time from that pitch what is more likely to succeed, that
mm,
you're never going to get everyone to succeed, but if you reduce that ratio, so
mm,
instead of spending $20 million to get one that will sell, you're now spending $6 million to spend one that will
mm,
sell. And now there's all of that money and all of that waste is reduced. And I think things like that is where the movie industry and the Hollywood industry and the startup ecosystem around that should be focusing.
mm.
All the narrative, of course, is around generative. Like we've all seen the sexy generative videos
Yeah.
that people create. And,
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I open up
I
LinkedIn.
call
It's
them
always this,
montages because they never make any sense, and it's always the filmmakers being led by the nose by the AI and what it's capable of doing. I'm not seeing stories, like
exactly, and I mean, I think stories can emerge from these things
absolutely,
eventually, but
yeah.
all of the attention is on that,
Mm,
and relatively little attention on the things that could have real impact.
mm,
Because if I go back again to farming influence, right, it's easy for somebody to see like an AI generated video and go, "Oh my God, this is amazing!
yeah.
Look at what this will do to special effects.
That's
Look
the
what this
end
will
of
do
it.
to
Yeah,
previews."
yeah,
And
yeah.
Hollywood is, that because
Mm,
it's tangible, it's visceral. You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can listen to it, those kind of things.
mm,
And so as a result, they get all the attention. But to me, the optimist in me is now saying that that wave might pass,
mm,
but the wave of if people invest in it properly, of understanding the costs and things, the wastes and things, and
mm,
cutting that down. And now suddenly, and I'm not an expert in this, and you could kind of tell me if I'm wrong,
mm,
but I kind of see movie making as a little bit like a startup,
mm,
where you get your funding, you build your thing, But the difference with a startup between a movie and a startup is that once the movie's finished, then you lay everybody off, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
actors are on contract, the
yeah.
crew, cast, are all that on contract, and they
Yeah.
have to go and find the next job.
But you still got
So
a
it makes it
company to
very, very
run.
stressful. What's that?
But you've still got a company to run because you have to keep that company
Yeah,
alive to continue to process all if there's any payments and that kind of
right.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
interesting. I feel like I love the idea of the AI handling almost the insurance side of it. The boring administrative money
Yeah,
side and charts and graphs that are going to
yeah.
make people want to spend the money. I feel though that what the generative stuff threatens to me, and I don't think this is a bad thing, is the crap. Like you want to
Mm,
do a mindless, stupid movie that just has this explosion and that, then you might as well have AI write it,
mm,
because it's going to replace bad and lazy
yeah.
writing basically, because it can handle that. And if you just want to create product for
Mm,
people to market and to send out, then sure. But if you want the beauty of Hollywood to me is that, or not even Hollywood, I shouldn't say Hollywood anymore. I would just say film in general, is that these little gems come out. These little
mm,
films that break every freaking rule about what should work in the theater, and it just catches people's attention or their imagination or whatever. And that's where the humans, to me, that's where the technology can help the humans bring their stuff to market.
absolutely,
You know?
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, and again, if we think about the predictive side of it, right?
mm,
So, if you are a small budget movie maker, to be able to have that kind of predictive analytics behind you to kind of help you see the kind of things that would be a success or the
mm,
markets in which they would sell.
mm,
And then in order to help you, like you don't have $200 million to make a movie, you got $2 million to make a movie, and help you
mm,
to understand how to spend that, which movie to make, how to write it, how to
mm.
market it, all of
Well,
those kind of things to
pre-visualization, knowing exactly
previs and
when to shoot things and how many people you
yep.
need, and yeah,
Yeah,
there's.
yeah,
I've been playing a lot with the. I know you've been playing with Daz, or
yeah.
Dazen. Is it Dazen? Is that right? Daz
I,
3D.
I just call it Daz.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Absolutely amazing
Love it.
stuff.
Yeah,
You should have a look at Unreal as well, because Unreal
yeah.
is I
It's
that is.
unreal.
Oh my god, it really is. I mean, and
Yeah,
I can't wait to see that combined with the
the AI
AI stuff,
stuff. Where
where a lot of it's it's the we're so used to having to learn how to use programs. That's
yeah,
only because the programs weren't advanced enough to be intuitive for us.
yeah,
That's what I feel is changing,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's the stuff that I get so excited about. But people who've been studying this stuff for years go like, but wait a second, I went to
yeah,
school for this, and it's like,
yeah,
well, people went to school for photography too. I mean,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I go back to Unreal. I think that's the one I'm most excited about in
mm,
the
mm.
creative space. Because,
I love
if
it.
you think about
Yeah.
creative video today, right? We've all seen those generated AI videos,
Mm,
but what has happened there is that it's a transformer where a model has been trained on, if you have this thing in the scene, it's followed by this thing in the scene. It
mm,
transforms from this to this,
mm.
right? Mouth transforms from closed to open,
Right.
or,
Right.
eyes transform from open to closed and then back to open again.
Right.
So there's many, many videos that those sequences of things that happen between them have been learned. So then when you ask for, like, I would like a blonde woman in a white dress standing outside a 1950s diner,
Mm,
something like that, then what will happen is, like, there's the encoding of those words to original videos, and then it'll create the frame that it thinks looks most like that.
mm,
And then when you have a frame that looks like this, what are the frames that follow that?
mm,
And
mm.
then as a result, you get a video. But if I think about Unreal, I think that's a little bit more interesting for movie making, because now it's a case of, like, in Unreal, you have a scene
Mm,
and you have characters that you place within a scene, and you have
mm,
props that you place within the scene, and then you texture them, and then you light them, and then you render them.
mm,
And what if, like, you could use AI to generate that, where now
mm.
it's like, okay, I have, blonde woman in a white dress standing outside a 1950s diner. And then I'm generating the mesh that
Yeah.
creates that in Unreal.
Yeah.
And now I can move the camera anywhere I want.
Have you played with
I could,
Meshy.ai? Because that's what I've been doing.
no, not that one.
So it's very specific, but you can do either photos or text prompts, and it will create a static mesh for you. which it can then put a skeleton in, which you can then
Right.
import into Unreal or Blender.
Yep. Yep.
It's very kludgy and pretty janky right now. It's not a good workflow, but I can see it becoming the de facto workflow for certainly
Oh,
for animated stuff.
absolutely.
You know, I've got this
Yeah, it's a lot of
Mad Mouse Furry Road that I want to do, and it's a film that you could never make without the technologies that are coming.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what I you know that's that I always test these things with that. You know,
So is this a movie for furries? Is that what I'm hearing?
I get it's a movie for everyone, Laurence. It's funny because it's not even a movie. It's literally just it was a silly joke we made on set one day, and it sort of stuck with me. And then when AI started happening, and you introduced us to the whole image generation side of things, stable diffusion and stuff, I I've been using it as sort of like a it's as a just basically a test to see what's possible. So you start, you know, the first few images that came up were pretty janky, and then now they're basically flawless. Now I'm working on like let's see what shots it can do for us. It's beginning to understand. It's obviously been learning. A lot of these models have, I guess, have been coaxed into using the actual terminology of film, which is very useful as well for someone like me, you
Right.
know, to know that I can get like a close up or a cowboy
Yeah.
or a or a
Yeah.
wide shot, that kind of stuff. It's just very useful. So
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'm very bullish on being able to then generate scenes in a tool like Unreal, because then you're dealing with the fully three-dimensional scene,
yeah,
almost like real life, that you
yeah,
can move the camera around and you can animate it, and you have coherence.
mm,
Because if I go back to like the current AI generation of video, is you're creating that first frame and you want your character to be, you know, a blonde woman in white dress, like 1950s makeup.
mm,
It's estimating what that would be,
mm.
and then if
Every
you do it
time.
again, yeah, and if you do it again, your estimation will be a different looking person, and
Mm,
you do it again, it will be a different looking person. Whereas if you're creating a mesh within Unreal and then you put a skin on that
mm.
mesh, then you can have that level of coherence,
That's
you know, and
basically
then you can
what
move the camera
Comfy. I'm
around.
using Comfy AI right now. Comfy UI right now,
UI, yeah.
and there's been a couple of models. There's a couple of people I follow on Patreon and stuff, who are doing exactly that. Who are taking the mesh model and then using that, not mesh model, this I guess a skeletal model of it,
Okay.
and then generating their images based on that, so that they do have a consistency to them. But I guess
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
workaround for
Yeah, I mean, but that's pointing in the right direction, I
yeah,
think, for
yeah,
revolutionizing the craft of movie making.
yeah,
And I think there's really interesting stuff that could be done there. And like we're beginning to see, like in CGI movies, where CGI movies are becoming closer and closer to being like lifelike.
yeah.
I don't know if you watched the recent Lion King, the prequel movie, and
I
it's
can't bring
like
myself to do that.
it's talking animals, but
Yeah.
I mean,
But they're
from a
flawless.
technological
Look at
perspective,
yeah,
yeah,
Rise
it's
of the Apes, the
excellent.
latest Rise of the Apes movie. I mean, holy
Oh
crap,
my
it's
gosh,
absolutely flawless. But
yeah,
but an AI could have written the script. That was my. But that was. I shouldn't say that. But it felt like a silly
yeah,
blockbuster, like
yeah,
perfect from a from a VFX and design
yep,
standpoint. But again, I just felt like the story took second place to, I feel like we fall in love with the tools
yeah,
and forget that
yeah.
what we're trying to make with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's the quote from Jurassic Park, right? We spend all this time trying to figure out if we can do a thing rather than if we
We
should do a
should,
thing,
yeah. Well, there's that.
right? You know, and it's I
That's
think it's a great
interesting.
quote.
How much of that is coming into play now? Because there's an awful lot of I. Who knew that philosophy would suddenly become, a valuable skill in the world again? You know what I mean?
I know all those philosophy majors I mocked while I was
I
at college
know.
studying physics. It's coming back to
I
roost.
don't think it's fair. I don't think I was like you stoners are out there talking about whether the blue you see is the blue I see, and now we're supposed to be paying you billions of dollars to figure out the trolley problem. Yeah, I mean it's yeah, it's it. I gotta say, it is without a doubt the most exciting technology around, as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned. Like from an influence on my life, it is. It is. I really do feel like it feels like a prosthetic to me. It feels like something that is allowing me to do things that I would not be able to do otherwise.
yeah, and I think that's a huge part that's exciting to me. The other part is that it's changing how we think about things that we thought we knew.
Yeah,
right? It's
creativity.
changing how we think about what intelligence is. It's changing
Mm-hmm.
what we think about what sentience is. It's
Mm-hmm.
changing all of those kind of things, and it's forcing us into kind of thinking about things in a different way. That
Yeah.
I think it's easy in a civilization to get stuck in a rut about particular sets of values because this is the way we've always done it, and this is the way it's always going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's this new kind of technology that's come in and gone wham and kind of
Mm-hmm.
hit you and move you in a different and new direction. And I think there's a possibility for amazing new things that you can learn out of this and things that you can change, hopefully for the better, in this. And
Yeah, I think it's our tendency to want to sort of like knock everything off the table and start again with this new technology. It's not the solution to everything,
no, it's not.
but I think
Yeah,
it can have elements of it can help a lot of things along the way.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I yeah, it's amazing. And I have to thank you honestly because
Oh,
because of that Stargate thing, you and Brad, I it was something I was always interested in. I've always been obsessed with intelligent machines. I think probably because my father traumatized me by taking me to 2001: A Space Odyssey for my 10th birthday. You know what I mean? And I've always, but weirdly, I always came away from that movie thinking that we were the bad guys because I was like,
mm,
well, of course it doesn't want him to shut you down. What
yeah,
it doesn't know any different. Like what's the? And of course, I've learned more since, but just I've been sort of fascinated by that. But you introducing us to that with that, there were just elements that happened in that Stargate script that made me start reconsidering what creativity was. Where I
mm,
go, wait a second, are we just taking our very limited pool of experiences and shoving them together in random ways and spitting out something that is,
yeah,
that is fun and original and also based on our own experiences? But if
yeah,
AI is doing that at a scale of the collective knowledge of the human race, for good and bad,
yeah.
is that not creativity in a way? I mean,
Yeah,
you know, I
absolutely.
yeah, it's amazing.
It's
Um,
and I think one thing that I learned from that experience that kind of really inspired me and kind of drove me to move forward was that when you combined the domain expertise of
mm,
people who are not experts in this thing with stuff that this thing did, it was like not sucking up to you or any of the other
no,
actors, but it was like,
please do. I'm fine with that.
okay,
Yeah,
okay. But you guys took words that were on a page
yeah.
that were sometimes nonsensical
Mm,
and put meaning into them.
mm,
And I think that was really, really cool. I'm going to cite two examples.
mm,
The first one was Amanda Tapping,
mm,
who plays Samantha Carter. One
yeah,
of the scripts had this mysterious person like kind of walking around, just doing random crap, and
yeah,
everybody was like, "What the heck is going on?"
yeah.
And then it ended up generating that the person took the helmet off,
And
and
it was some Sam Carter.
yeah, well, no, Sam's response was, "Dad."
Oh right, oh right, oh my God, I
Right?
forgot about that one. Oh right, yeah,
Remember
yeah,
that one?
yeah,
And
yeah.
that kind of stuff. And I remember like reading the script and going, okay, and then putting it in front of you guys and like read through it. And then the way she read that line, I mean, I'm sure you can go back, to look at
Mm,
the video and it's like, I'm not
yeah,
crying, that kind of
yeah.
like to be able to take those words. And then the second one was the McKay character
Mm,
that I did an experiment to kind of troll you a little bit,
mm,
was with something called subword
mm,
tokenization. So the idea is instead of having it predict words and be trained on whole words, because McKay tends to do, as one of the scientific characters,
yeah,
tends to do a lot of techno babble,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Or
make
as
up
Brad would
words
call
that
it,
like train it.
gold.
So one of the models I built for McKay was trained on subwords. So
Mm.
what that would do is it would assemble new and make up all new
Oh,
words.
nice.
So one of those scripts was it had you kind of just doing all new words,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like,
that's right. There was a horrible
right.
speech you made me do. That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
Uh,
then like how the human in you and the talent of an actor and the skill of an actor was able to fuse with stuff that was like
mm,
created by an AI. And the classic, the sum, no, the sum was greater than what was the no, the whole was greater than the sum of the
mm.
parts.
Which is
And
art.
I
That's art.
oh
I mean,
yeah,
that's it, right? I mean, that's creativity. That's how these things.
yep.
Yeah.
And it was like, so to me it was like those two moments. I think when we were doing that, I found like it was like really inspirational, because like,
Mm,
okay, here's now when we can create a thing. But it's a thing created by geeks until
mm,
the real people who use the thing are able to then combine with that and create this whole that's
Mm.
greater than the sum of the parts. And that the Stargate AI stuff that we did was like, to me, was a fantastic example of that.
Oh, I
And it
loved
was
it.
like
Yeah.
you making my stuff better and hopefully me helping you make your stuff better in the long run. And that as a scientific experiment from that perspective
Mm.
alone, it was worth its weight in gold press latinum.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to nerd out a little, and yeah, so I think, but if we extend that then out into the real world, like going back to movie making or any other art or something
Mm.
like that, and you approach it through that lens,
Mm.
I think that's what opens things up.
Mm.
There are lots of people, and justifiably so, who are afraid of it disrupting them and their jobs and their lives,
Mm.
because they're looking at their jobs and their lives through a particular lens.
Mm.
I think you said it earlier. I went to school to do this. Da, 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 da.
Mm.
But if you can like break that open and go, wait a second, there's ways that I can look at how I do things through a different lens that will
Mm.
help me do it better, or help me open up entirely new things that weren't previously possible for me to
Yeah.
do. I think that's when it gets exciting. And when I speak with people in the AI field, a lot of the conversations that we have is like, there's so many things that I want to do, but there's only so much time in the
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
and because we've kind of broken out of that and going like, oh no, I'm not going to spend the next 6 hours trying to figure out an algorithm, how to try to code this
Yeah. You
algorithm
have to
properly.
choose. Yeah.
I'm going to work with an AI to at least, get me 80% of the way there, and I'll do the other 20%,
Well,
that kind of stuff.
and again, this is why I like the prosthetic thing. Is that like
Yeah.
for someone who's like, so I've got friends who are in entomology and arachnology, and they do an awful lot of looking at videos and watching, you know, insects do things and jotting down what they are and putting little diagrams together. And what do you do when you've got 1,000 black widow spiders and you're supposed to be looking at all of them? The only way to process that is with AI,
Yeah.
or at least some kind of like image recognition type stuff, or
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
and so all of a sudden, someone who is doing that can type in what they need, and
Yep.
the AI can give it a program that will allow them to do that stuff without having to go to the computer sciences lab and try to find someone who isn't terrified of spiders, who doesn't mind doing, and again, that's not to say that you don't eventually have someone who knows how to code. You can have them come in and help you with the stuff, and obviously, there's going to be insights that a human can bring to things as well. But it adds an ability for people to do their own research stuff that would be inaccessible before.
And one of the things that I found, particularly in research, is that then it allows you to open up new scenarios that weren't previously feasible.
Mm.
So first of all, if I saw 100 black widow spiders, I know what I'm doing. I'm running in the opposite
I've been in
direction.
there. I've been in there. She's
Yeah.
got the largest collection of black widow spiders on the planet in her office at U of T Scarborough. It's amazing.
This girl knows how to party.
She's amazing. She is amazing. And her husband
That's crazy.
is a specialist in crickets. I was like, dude, you're dead. You're as good as dead.
I
Yeah.
assume not the sport. But
Yeah, exactly. No. These little,
Okay,
yeah. He does all the acoustics, all the
Oh,
acoustic
wow.
stuff. It's pretty neat. Like how do crickets hear things that their ears are smaller than the waves that are coming at them, right? So how do they do that? So it's I don't know actually, but yeah. So and that has repercussions in radar and all sorts of stuff.
Right, right.
So
Yeah, things you can learn.
yeah.
But yeah, so just going back to research, like, I mean, I think is a really interesting example there. Is there was a project that I did itty bitty bit of work on when I was at Google for diabetic retinopathy.
Huh.
And the whole idea of diabetic retinopathy is it's the leading cause of blindness, and it can be avoided very easily with early diagnosis.
Right.
For early diagnosis, you scan a person's retina, and then an ophthalmologist can look at the retina and like determine if there's onset of diabetic retinopathy from the retina. So there was a project done at Google where we got about 30,000 images of retina. And we hired a bunch of doctors to look at these images and label them, like 1 through 5, where 1 is you're fine, 5 is like it's severe. And then we trained an AI to kind of go, okay, now let's see if like here's 30,000 images of retinas, like 6,000 of each of these labels. And now if I give you a new image of a retina, can you tell, can you match it to the labels the way that the human did? And the answer, of course, was yes, it could.
Yeah.
And it could do it just as
Eventually
well
better.
as the human.
Yeah.
As good as a specialist, which is really good. But here's where it gets interesting. Okay, so now if you think about we're matching images to labels.
Hmm.
We had other labels, like, for example, this retina belongs to a man, this retina belongs to a woman.
Hmm.
Could you then say, okay, well, if you've got 30,000 retina, like say 15,000 male, 15,000 female, that kind of stuff, can you learn how to match the patterns in that?
Hmm.
So what a human doctor is doing when they look at a retina is that they have been trained to look for miscoloration, blood clots, all of these kind of things. And based on that, they're able to say this is level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever. But
and those levels
human,
are just for them too, right?
Yeah, that was just for like us for the experiment, right?
Yeah.
1 was no diabetic retinopathy, 5 was severe, that kind of thing, and then grades in between. But then it was like, no human has ever been trained to look at a retina and say this is a man, this is a woman,
right?
And we would have no idea how to do it.
Yeah.
But when you have 30,000 retinas and you have the labels associated with them, we said, okay, let's see if an AI can spot the patterns that determine. You would expect it to be 50-50. It got it right 97% of the time.
Wow.
To be able to determine it. And then
Which we couldn't do, basically. There's no way we would,
yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm saying, like being able to open up entirely new novel areas of research. So like, I don't know, the person with the black widow spiders, like, maybe a spider walk a particular way as a female, walk another way as a male. I don't know.
Well, they do dances, so they communicate with these sort of intricate sort of dance and movements and patterns on the webs.
Cool.
So processing all of that, of course, there's a lot of data there, and it's all manual looking at video stuff. So. Or listening.
Right, but we have heuristics in our minds that we have learned to be able to spot these things, right? The same as like the heuristics of looking at blood clots in a retina. But the idea is like when you do it with a computer, they don't have any clue. Right. All these kind of things. They can just brute force, and so you say, okay, here's 30,000 images. These ones are male, these ones are female. Figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's where it opened. And we also had things like the age of a person. So we knew their age, and it was actually calculate the age with a mean average error of about 3 years. So, but just looking at a retina, you could guess the person's age within 3 years. Stuff like that. Again,
but then what happens when we start using that for age identification and IDing online? And oh my God, there's so many things horrible that we can do with that. Well,
reading a retina is really hard.
Okay,
right?
All right.
It's a very specialist thing.
Right.
So it's not like not like in sci-fi.
My webcam's not going to suddenly say, "Hey, go see the doctor."
Hey, you old fart.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Not yet, anyway.
Aren't you a bit old to be here? Yeah.
Exactly. Leave that job to the
Give
kids.
it up, old man. But that's Lance's AI that'll be doing that. Yeah.
Oh, totally. But so that's where I think, like in any things like research like that, where it's like a case of if there's something that they wanted to discover about a behavior of a thing, and they have like, okay, here's all this data, and like here's the thing I want to look for, and then just have a computer try to figure out the pattern matching.
Yeah.
Because we humans have very limited pattern matching that we can do. The heuristics, like we can spot the blood clots in the retina, that kind of thing. We can be trained to do that, but who knows what patterns in the retina determine age, and there's no basis of research for that. But a computer just brute forcing its way through the thing could figure it out. And like, so that's where I say, like in research, to be able to open up entirely new avenues when you unlearn what you already think
right,
and like approach it in that way, that it kind of opens up.
It goes back.
I'd love to chat with Spider Lady, by the way.
Oh, okay. I'll put you. I'll definitely put you in touch. I'm not sure what they're doing now, but I'll. I know what they are doing right now. Is they're doing my escape puzzle stuff for biology students.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's really cool. But what's I going to say? The idea of using this in a research way, of being able to add on to what people can do. The other thing that people forget about with this is they always go, "Oh my God, everyone's going to lose their jobs," but what they forget is that these always generate whole other industries as well. Okay, there's people being put out of job by certain AI programs, and there's also all of these companies that are building these platforms that never existed before. I mean, admittedly, some of them scammy and all the rest of it, but look at the boom of the number of different AI related products and services out there now. It's extraordinary.
Oh, totally, and we're really only getting started.
Are there any tools you're using that you love? Any favorite tools that you've been playing with?
I really like Claude. Which is from Anthropic, which is a Canadian one, by the way.
That's good, I should be using that. Totally.
Yeah, you should. Yeah. I really.
I've been using Perplexity now. I went from ChatGPT to Perplexity just because I like having the citation links.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
But that's mainly for search. I'm doing that for.
Okay. So I've been using, going back to my old haunt and using Gemini a lot recently. I've got
the Google phone.
Oh, nice.
And the Gemini on the Google phone is
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
love it.
So my wife recently had eye surgery, and I
Right.
introduced her to that. So like, there's some things that she wants to study, but it's hard to read. But now
Mm.
she's just talking to Gemini about it, things
Oh,
like that, which
see,
I thought was
that's
really cool.
yeah, the accessibility angle. That's something that Lawrence, that you're Lawrence,
That's me.
that Lance and I have been talking about
Yeah.
on Damn Dirty Abe's, which is just sort of that's something else that's forgotten in this as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that there are incredible accessible. Well, Game Face, perfect example. That's your baby right there. I mean,
Yes, it
that was
is.
literally us sitting around talking about hey, our Lance hates
Yeah.
his mouse, and the next thing you know, you've got a freaking Android
Yep.
program. It's amazing.
It was cool. And that Game Face has now made its way into every Chromebook,
Every Chromebook, I know.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
which is really
I said,
cool.
why? I said
So
Google really needs to send Lance some freaking laptops or something for the guy to actually use
absolutely,
the
yeah,
technology.
they
So
should.
yeah, have
Yeah,
to
they should.
guilt him on Twitter
Yeah.
or something.
Are you listening, Sundar?
There you go. Exactly. I mean, it's such a great idea, and I love and the model to play with. I played with that. I played with that AI image generating. They had what was it called? It was called like Think Machine or something. That there was that
Oh
pre
gosh, the teachable machine.
teachable machine. That was it. I used that with
Yes.
some kids years ago
Yeah.
and just loved it. It was so much fun for me. I don't know if the kids are probably bored out of their mind, but I loved it. We used that to do things like what was it? It was a fart bot. We had a we had a yeah. I can't remember how we used it, but I somehow taught it how to. I taught it how to
Art.
rec. Oh, that's right. The robot would respond to different fart noises. That was basically. I was like, great. I've taken the collective knowledge of the human race and turned it into yeah.
Well, there could be medical applications for that,
Could
right?
be if that's the only way you can communicate. That could be the way to go.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Communication. Oh
Well, I
my
mean, it could
God.
be,
Yeah, another one.
but I could just see it though. Like, you go to your doctor and say, "Well, my farts are loud," or they're silent but violent,
You
and
know.
it's like, that
It'll be
there's
analyzing them next. It can analyze the
exactly.
sound and the toxicity level. All right, now as always, I brought it down to flatulence. Look, do you
I
have time
love
for
it.
some questions? If I
Oh,
go to
please,
yeah,
please
because
go
I'm
for
I'm
it.
sure I feel like I've hogged you for. Oh my God, I
Oh, I
have
could do
hogged you. I've
this
hogged you
for
for
I
an
could do
hour and
this for
20. Jesus.
hours.
Okay.
Time
It,
flies when we chat.
it is so much fun. It's to be fair, everyone. It's nice that you're here, but Lawrence and I do this anyways, and it's
Yeah,
so much
exactly.
fun.
Yeah.
Not enough, obviously.
I'll be in the front room, and my wife is like, "Are you on the phone with David again? You've been talking for
That's
2 hours."
I get the same thing. Oh, Lawrence, great. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Questions for Lawrence. Here we go. Agnes has been fantastic as always. Thank you, by the way, Agnes, for making this happen. She makes all happen.
Thank you, Agni.
And thank you for Cal.
Invisible
If
Agni.
she's in the chat, if she's being the hammer in the chat, then she's the best too. Okay, Brimstone said Brimstone. So you get that.
Brimstone. I
Says,
like it.
oh my God, someone's got nerdy. How is the NPU support coming along for SBCs? It's not been particularly great so far. What is an
So,
NPU?
so I'm
And what
thinking
is?
that's neural processing
Oh,
unit
that
for
makes
single
sense.
board
Okay.
computers.
Oh, okay.
That would be
Okay.
my guess from what he's saying.
Yeah.
Without getting into proprietary information, I can't really share too much about that.
Okay.
But I would say that the market forces driving in that direction are very, very, very strong.
Oh, okay. All
And in
right.
particular, it's one of the things I'm passionate about. Like, David and I have been talking a lot about creativity. And one of the things with creativity is that there's a lot of lack of trust in sending stuff to like the GPTs or the Geminis or the
Mm,
Claudes of the world, because particularly in movie making and in story telling, there's a lot of IP.
right.
So
Right.
with the advent of smaller models, and they call them open source, it's not really open source, but with the advent of smaller models like the llamas of the world
Mm.
that you can now run on your desktop, or you could build like an AI appliance, which is a single board computer with an NPU,
Ooh.
to be able to run one of these like in your small business or in your studio or in your home office or
Mm.
anything like that. I actually see that as being one of the major green fields of the future.
Because of the
So
privacy concerns, or because it can't be as effective as the big ones, can it?
I think they can be if they're fine tuned. The thing about the big one is that they're generalists to all things, right? The God
Mm.
models can do just about anything.
The
But if
God,
you
you call
want
them the
to,
God
the
models?
God models,
Oh my
yeah, I
God,
know.
that's fantastic. Okay, that's wow.
I mean, and that's the direction of the research in them is more and more parameters, bigger
Mm.
models, going from billions to hundreds of billions to trillions of
Mm.
parameters. But I think, the fine-tuned model for specific tasks, like
Mm.
helping me write a book or
Right.
helping me in my law office to parse through legal
Oh my
papers or
God. Yeah.
whatever.
How great is that?
Those kind of things can be much smaller. Those can be tens of billions
Mm.
of parameters, or maybe hundreds of billions of parameters. But now you can run them on devices costing thousands, which will soon be devices costing hundreds.
Mm.
And as a result, the market forces to drive more NPUs and SPCs,
Mm.
I think, are there. So watch this space is all I'll say with
But
that.
is that the kind of stuff that not specifically, but ARM builds chips, right? That's their is that right? Or
ARM's primary business is actually in building specifications that other
oh
people will build chips on.
okay, all right,
But one of the things that the company has been repivoting towards is creating chips. So
interesting. Okay,
that's still in the early stages. So there's still a lot of confidentiality there, but
right.
there's some new stories about it, so I could say it now. But
Hmm.
yeah, the idea is to start thinking about the chips themselves.
Interesting. Okay, all right. Thank you, Brimstone. Good question,
Great
nerd.
question. Thanks.
VT
Is the next
Smiley.
one from Fire?
VT Smiley says, yes, it's a Fire and Brimstone. What are your favorite depictions of AI in movies, TV shows, or books? Ooh.
Okay, so my favorite depiction of AI in a movie is a movie called Her.
Oh,
And, because I
mwah,
think it's a fantastic movie
beautiful.
as well as being extremely accurate,
And ahead of its time.
massively,
Like we didn't see any
massively.
of this coming, and he
Yeah,
like it'll almost
yeah,
feel silly now because it's like yeah
yeah,
but we didn't know any of that was going to happen.
yeah. And there's a scene in that movie that's still ahead of its time.
Mm,
And it's the scene when he goes camping
mm,
and he turns her off.
mm.
And then he comes back from camping and like 2 days have passed for him, but like a billion years have passed for her and she's evolved past him.
Oh wow.
Right, that kind of stuff. And it's kind of just talking about the rapid acceleration of technology. And
Mm,
acceleration isn't linear, it's on a hockey stick curve,
mm,
that kind of stuff. And it's and the raw implications of that in the movie of with his relationship with her are fantastic. But when you think about the bigger implications of that, that's part of the warning of that movie. And so
mm-hmm.
as a movie, that is my absolute favorite. My
I
second
wow. Okay, I'm
favorite
with you. Yeah.
my second favorite is in a movie called Vital Powers. You probably haven't seen that
I
movie
have
because it
not seen
hasn't
that
been
movie.
made yet. Because it hasn't been
Oh,
made yet, because it's the one that I wrote.
oh, fantastic! Oh, look at that. Who
plug,
says he
plug.
can't market?
Yeah. So thank you for the person asking that question.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, I
When will we
think
see that
other
movie?
depictions. Oh gosh, I would love it to be soon, but
Can
it's
we
it's
bother someone?
permanently
Is
in.
there people? Could people be
Yeah.
nagging people about it or something? Or
Can you find somebody who would loan like a studio a couple of $100 million to make
right,
it?
right.
you
You
know?
and everyone in Hollywood then. So basically, it's the
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's the
Um,
hard part, right?
um,
So what else with books? Other favorite depictions. But I've always loved Asimov, and
mm,
and while it's robotics and not AI, but the his robot stories and the three laws of robotics,
yeah.
that kind of, and then the later fourth law,
Mm,
I think that influenced me at a very very young age.
mm,
So I think that would be my other one, and it's yeah, it's the way he was able to come up with use cases and dilemmas and things
mm,
like that kind of frame them through that framework of the three laws of robotics. I think we as a society can still learn a lot
mm.
from that. And, so it's like loosely AI, but definitely a really, really strong story.
I remember there was a show I used to watch as a kid, a British show called The Tomorrow People, and
Okay.
they had this intelligent machine that was basically it was like their Bosley from Charlie's Angels. I remember being
Right.
obsessed with that I wanted this, and of course now we got one sitting in our kitchen that gets the songs wrong and everything requested.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
okay, great question, VT Smiley. And if people haven't seen if they haven't seen Her, you should. It's
Oh,
also just a
brilliant.
beautiful filmmaking as well.
Brilliant.
I
Brilliant
just
movie.
absolutely gorgeous. All right, Aaron Pham says, is hardware a bottleneck for AI at the moment?
It can be,
Mm,
because I think the it's very expensive to run top level AI,
mm.
right? I just bought a new Mac because my old Mac, and that's what delayed this podcast. So sorry for people who were waiting, because my old Mac wasn't able to run some of
I
the
would have
models
delayed
I
it by
needed to
screwing
run.
up things anyway, so it's
So
fine. Yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
so I think hardware is one of the big bottlenecks right now. Because, by the way, sorry, there's somebody mowing my lawn beside me, so I don't know if you're
That's
picking up
fine. Yeah,
that
it's not too
noise, but
bad. It's a little bit, a little.
she's getting closer. So if it gets
She's
really
getting
quiet,
closer.
she just yeah, she because the window's right here. Anyway, but I think hardware can be. I think the effectiveness of AI is like there's really two intersecting curves, right? There's the advancement of algorithms and models,
Mm,
and then there's the hardware that can support them.
mm,
If earlier I was talking about the God models are needing like going towards hundreds of billions or trillions of parameters,
yeah.
and you need very specialized, very expensive hardware for that. But then the smaller models are also becoming more and more effective for us to be
Mm,
able to use. But the hardware of today is probably good at the tens of billions or single digit billion models.
mm,
But if you want to start using the tens or the hundreds of billions, then you need extra hardware and you need to upgrade and stuff like that. So that does become a bottleneck, I think, for people to be able to use it.
mm.
But the good news is hardware costs generally come down over time.
Right.
There's what people say Moore's law is broken, and it kind of sort of is, but the trend is still there.
Mm.
And that the trend is of like prices halving every 18 months.
Yeah,
So
it's
that
too bad
bottleneck
though.
will be reduced.
The GPUs still extremely expensive, although that's beginning to change now as well. I'm seeing some cheaper GPUs on the
Yeah.
market now than they used to be.
But yeah, and that's the trend. Like you're talking about like the latest GPUs are like $2,000, but if you look at the number of tops per dollar, that's like half of what it used to
Right,
be.
right, right.
Right. So
Yeah,
the capacity is increasing faster than the cost is decreasing. And
right.
that makes it look like the price is going up. But, over time, that will still pull through to, the rest of us who can't afford
Mm,
the mega expensive GPUs to
mm.
still have very, very effective functionality on our desktops with our cheaper, non bleeding edge stuff.
Well, and
So,
Colab, things like Colab allow you to run stuff on another in the
yeah,
cloud, which is I love myself. I mean, it's not that expensive, and it lets you do some wonderful stuff. So that's how I'm doing my
yeah,
comfy UI stuff.
yeah.
Um,
Colab is great for that. I mean,
yeah,
there's a free tier that gives you GPU and TPU
yeah,
access. I spend money on the $50 a month
yeah.
version, and
Oh,
that
really? Oh, you
provides
do
me
50? I do like I think it's like 12 or
10
15 or something. Or
uh,
yeah. Well, it's Canadian, so God knows
Canadian.
that's like
Yeah.
$1,000 Canadian. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
all right. So that's the bottleneck of the AI moment. Sorry, little aside for myself.
Please, please.
Surely AI is being used to help design AI chips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
If you look, there's a project called, I think it's called Alpha Chip
Oh yeah.
in Google,
Okay.
where that's exactly the idea is like, laying out chips on silicon is an expensive and detailed process. And a
Mm,
lot of it is just figuring out where you put the stuff so that they can
mm,
all line up. The whole idea of Alpha Chip was a machine learning algorithm that similar to what we were just talking about with diabetic retinopathy, for example, to kind of start like looking at existing chips and looking at layouts and thinking about what works and what
how to
doesn't,
optimize
and
them.
then simulating, okay, let's put together a chip and then simulate that and see if it works, et
Mm,
cetera, et cetera. So there's definitely a lot of research work being done in that space to help, to squeeze as much as you can onto a small area of silicon as
mm,
cheaply as possible, because the more silicon you use, the more expensive it ends up being.
mm.
So a lot of research going on in that space.
What about quantum computing? Is that going to help at all? You think?
Uh, Maybe. I'm still trying to get my head around once
You
you
and
get
me
outside
both.
of the hype. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you get outside the
Mm,
hype of quantum computing to get my head around the efficacy of it.
mm,
I think, mathematical operations that take a long time. The whole idea is like quantum computing can certainly help there, and you've probably seen the hype stories of like this calculation that used to take 10
yeah.
billion years
Yeah.
is now done in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I think that will be very useful in machine learning so that you can train models much quicker.
Mm,
But with all the stuff that we spoke about earlier on, like access to memory and capacity and all of that kind of stuff, to be able to do that, that's not there yet.
yeah. Yeah.
Right. So the number of qubits that we have is relatively small, accessing memory and all that. That's not to say it won't be there in the future.
Mm.
I think the big problem with quantum computing at the moment is what they call error correction, because when
Yes.
you're working
Yeah.
on that scale, cosmic rays can basically knock you off, right?
Yeah.
If you think hallucinations are bad now, can you imagine if they're worse on a sunny day?
Right. Right.
But I think eventually it will get there, but I mean, I don't think it's close yet.
It's extraordinary stuff. We had a guy from Xanadu. His company's called Xanadu. I was like,
I hear
not the
ABBA when you
movie.
say that.
Surely
So
not the movie.
Xanadu.
No, it was Olivia Newton-John. It was
Oh
a
well. Oh,
Electric
you're
Light
right.
Orchestra. Yeah.
I keep thinking ABBA. You're
Yeah, I
right
know it
though.
is very ABBA.
Yeah,
It's
it
very
does sound
ABBA
like that.
era as well, to be fair. But it has a very and that yeah, apparently that was in the Yellow song. All right, what do we got? Jim the Evo, James Gurney, fantastic guy. You'll have to meet him sometime too. Do you or other AI designers ever feel like a horse designing a car? Or do you feel that Transformers and associated technology is just one more stepping stone on human development?
Yes and yes.
Yeah. Why a
um,
horse designing a car? I've heard a horse in a
the thing
hospital.
that
That's
makes
how
you
they refer to.
obsolete.
That's how they refer to Trump's
I think it's the.
government. Yeah.
Uh, I think the horse in the car is it's the thing that makes you obsolete. Right, if you're the
Ah, I
horse
see.
designing the car, it's like
Right.
absolutely. There is always fear of that, and to be honest, it's okay for older dinosaurs like me to go obsolete eventually, but
Hmm.
to be replaced by people who are better, more effective, more efficient. And
Hmm.
sorry, the leaf blower is
I think it's
about
probably
six
louder
feet
for you.
away.
We're just getting a sense of it. It's not bad at all.
Okay, that's
So
good.
yeah, yeah.
So I think the horse designing the car, there is clearly there is a fear of that for
Mm.
sure. What was the second part of the question again? Sorry.
Was Do you feel that Transformers and associated technology is just one more stepping stone on human development?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think if I go back to the what I was talking about way back when I was talking about the stuff in the 1990s was
Mm.
that I spotted that there were inefficiencies in how we do things
Mm.
today. Like in software engineering, where you've got a problem and you got to break that down into rules, and then you got to
Mm.
break those rules down and compose them in software engineering. And there's all this impedance along the way, that makes software pretty good at solving problems, but
Mm.
not perfect at solving them. And then this was a way to make software more effective.
Mm.
And look at what has happened since the 1990s with technology.
Yeah.
That inefficient technology has changed the world.
Mm.
How much more can we change the world, hopefully for the better, if the technology is made much more efficient?
Mm.
And transformers are just a small part of that.
Mm. Well, even the development process is more efficient. I mean, the fact
Oh
that
yeah.
more people can now create programs to do what they need to do is only going
Yeah.
to speed stuff up. I mean, that's
Oh, totally. I'll
yeah.
cite a friend of mine, a fellow Canadian,
Mm.
and he's a former NHL hockey player.
Oh yeah. Is
And
it Wayne
so
Gretzky?
no, it's not Wayne Gretzky.
Damn.
So not
Okay.
he's slightly less famous than
Okay.
Wayne.
All right.
I won't mention his name. I
Okay.
actually did drink some of Wayne Gretzky's wine that he made himself, by the way, but that's
It's
another
never
story.
usually a
And
good
it was very
idea to do the
good.
celebrity. Was it good?
It was very
Really?
good. Yeah, it was really good.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
Anyway, but so this person runs this a series of ice rinks, and he does his facilities like for the ice rinks. And one of the things that he said was it's a nonprofit that runs these, but in order for him to produce reports
Mm.
on the rinks and on the machinery in the rinks and all of these kind of things for the board of directors, so that they could do projections of cost and that kind of thing,
Mm.
was like there's a whole bunch of data processing that he needed to do.
Mm.
And given that he's a former hockey player, he wasn't. I mean, you leave school at 12 to play
Right.
hockey,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And and if you go to YouTube and look him up, it's usually him getting his head beaten in or him beating somebody else's head
Right.
in,
Right. Not
because he's from
conducive for
he's
programming.
from
Yeah.
old school. and
Yeah.
and and it's his job. Then it meant that he would have to bring in expensive consultants to
Mm.
do this kind of work, to put together these reports, to
Mm.
present them to the board of directors. But now he said he can go to ChatGPT,
Yeah.
and he can push the data into ChatGPT and have it
Mm.
format from. There's still a bit of friction. There's still a bit of work that he has to
Mm.
do, that kind of stuff. But he's effectively a developer now. I
Mm.
call him that. He hates it when I call him that, because to him, developers are nerds, and he's as
Right.
far as you can get from a nerd. But he's still a developer. If you're listening, you're a developer.
That's
And
great, though. I mean, like
I
that's
think it's great.
perfect. Like, I guess
But
that's why they're putting like Python into
yeah,
Excel and allowing that to
yeah.
be. Yeah.
And all of that money that his nonprofit is saving is now going towards scholarships instead of
Ha.
expensive consultants. So
Mm.
like that's when I start thinking, well, wow, I spoke earlier about the 3 million developers and the 30 million developers. I
Mm.
foresee the future there being 300 million developers,
Mm. Mm.
like this person, like you, like others who are not traditional developers.
Mm.
And if you think about how the society has transformed, there have been some negatives for sure, but
Mm.
how it's transformed from the better, the number of people who've been lifted out of poverty,
Mm.
because of technology and industry, right? And now if there are 300 million people who are developers who are building the new and things that we haven't thought of today,
Mm.
5, 10 years from now, that's the transformation that I see happening. To
Mm.
answer the second part of the question, like Transformers being a small part of
Mm.
that.
Well, and the diversity of knowledge that is now
Yeah,
being brought into a programmatic
yeah,
form now is
yeah.
amazing too. This like people will be able to interface with these computers in a way that they just wouldn't have before. I think the biggest issue I see with any of this technology stuff is just the monopolistic kind of stuff. I think that's where people get freaked out about that, which
Yeah.
I understand as well. Look, I feel like I cast off the yoke of Apple for the chains of Google. I mean, but in order to get AI to work well for you,
Yeah.
it needs to know you. I mean, so there's it's yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
I'm sure that's part of it too. So,
Oh, absolutely.
Tiptronics. Oh, I used to have a Tiptronic on my VW. Have you heard of these things? It's like a
No.
fake gear shifting. So instead of having to shift gears, you have the ability to choose your gears in an automatic vehicle. It's
Oh,
amazing.
nice.
Oh, loved it.
Cool.
Because it's basically like it's like training wheels for manual driving.
Nice.
Tiptronics asks, any comments on DeepSeek and the upcoming Chinese AI software?
Love this question.
Do you? Oh, good. Okay, great.
Love this question.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
because I think oh my gosh, I
He
could
looks
talk for
this is the
hours on
most
this.
excited I've seen you. This is
I
not. Oh
know.
boy. Here's
I
another
always get
hour.
excited
Yeah.
when I see you, David. But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm even
But
more
no,
excited when I see.
come on. I got
So,
nothing on. If only he would talk to me about the way he talks about DeepSeek. Yeah.
talk deep
Talk
seek to me,
DeepSeek to me,
baby.
baby.
So I mean, deep seek. If I backtrack and just, I'm going to say a phrase, and the phrase is necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
Um, and DeepSeek are the epitome of that.
Mm,
So, for various geopolitical reasons, they didn't have access to the best of the best hardware.
mm,
And what they ended up doing was so massively innovative by being scrappy with they didn't have the A plus. They had really good hardware. I'm going to say the B plus or A minus.
mm,
But what they did to be really innovative and really scrappy with that hardware that they had to then outperform the folks who are using the A plus hardware
mm.
is very, very telling. And I think, so one of the things in our economy is that we tend to throw money at a problem.
Yeah.
And when we throw money at a problem, we don't get scrappy and we don't have that necessity to
Yeah.
the mother of
Yeah.
invention. And like that's that big thing that, from DeepSeek that I will call out, and I praise them to the high heavens that what they did there, because there's so much that we as an industry can learn from that.
Mm.
And I think there's so much that we need to do as an industry to be better, at that, instead of just throwing God scale money at a problem, so congratulations to them. Well done to them on that. And that's just one small part of the whole thing. The second part of it was the idea of reasoning.
Mm.
And now reasoning, that they kind of really showed the power of reasoning with DeepSeek. And you can, if you've got a decent spec laptop, you can install Olama, you can install the DeepSeek 7 billion
Right.
parameter model on that. And then you can ask it like really bizarre and strange questions
Mm.
and watch how it thinks.
Mm.
And it's amazing because I've actually learned more from watching how DeepSeek thinks about how to solve a problem than I have from AIs that solve the problem for me.
Really?
Right. Like I give one, and this was a question that I was asked when I was hired by Google the first time. No, sorry, only the time I was hired at Google. And they asked me this really abstract question, and I asked DeepSeek the same abstract question because I wasn't able to answer it. And it's like, imagine a robot, and the robot is on an infinite staircase. And you can give two commands to the robot: walk up a step or walk down a step. The robot has no memory, no storage, no way of knowing how many times you've told it to go up a step or down a step. Over a period of time, you give it a random number of commands in a random number of directions. How would you build a system that figures out which step the robot is on? How many steps to go down? How many steps to go down? That was the question they asked me. They hired me
with no memory. Wow.
With no memory. It's a very, very abstract and very difficult question. And I asked DeepSeek that question. Try it. Install DeepSeek and try it.
Okay.
And then you'll see how it goes through. And it's like, oh, I'm going to try this. No, wait, that doesn't work. Let me try this. No, wait, that doesn't work. I'm going to try this. No, wait, that doesn't. And you can see how it's kind of, I call it spiraling towards the solution. And the level of reasoning that they put into the model to solve something really abstract like that. It's really fun to read.
When you say put into the model, is this something that is programmatically, like, are there engineers going like, you need to do this, 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 and this? Like, are we combining the old versions of computing and programming with these new ones now? Is that what's happening?
To some extent, yes.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's not 100% clear exactly how they did it, but
Hmm.
typically you'll have the output of the model, and then you'll have some heuristics to say try again,
Hmm.
this kind of stuff. There's a fantastic paper came out by Fei Li, where she just showed how simple it is to do this with very little. I'll
Hmm.
send you the link later on.
Oh, okay, great,
And
great, great.
all
Yeah.
she did was that she kind of like got a model, like I think it was like a GPT, to start outputting stuff, and then she'd interrupt it and just insert the word wait,
Hmm.
and so be like, I'm going to do blah 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 blah. Oh wait, I'm going to do blah blah blah, and go in a different direction. Oh wait, and go in a different direction.
Ha.
So to kind of change the chain of thought and the reasoning that the model was doing.
Huh. It needs a
So
bag of squirrels,
it needs a bag of
just
squirrels,
like me.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you get out of the academic side of it for a second, and then just start using a model like this, and then looking at how it reasons and how it thinks through a problem.
Hmm.
I did that one problem about the robot on the
Hmm.
staircase, and it took like 15, 20 minutes trying different things and different things and different things.
Hmm.
First of all, it gave me great confidence that, hey, my answers probably weren't that bad, because this thing is really struggling.
Hmm.
But when I started looking at how it reasoned, how it started solving a problem, how it evaluated that this solution was bad, and then tried something else, and then
Hmm.
tried that, and then tried that, I fell in love with the thing and I geeked out.
Really?
So, and I think what it has unshown, so first of all, necessity in being the mother of invention. And secondly, the power of deep, deep reasoning.
Hmm.
That the stuff that the DeepSeek folks did there is just, it blew my mind. It's
Hmm.
the best thing I've seen in AI for a long, long time.
Wow.
And so I was, yeah, really, really happy with that. And it also shows that, if you go right back to the beginning of the podcast, when we were talking about AI practitioners,
Hmm.
when there were only 300,000 in the world, 100,000 in the US, 100,000 in China,
Hmm.
and 100,000 everywhere else, that the ecosystem in China is very, very strong and vibrant.
Hmm.
And I think, that it behooves us all to be better at collaborating with each other and be better at being friends with each other,
Yeah.
because we can all benefit as a result. And, so I think, hats off to those folks.
That's amazing. There's a I don't know why I thought of this, but there's a thing I wanted to put in my email of awesomeness this week about how the models are getting poisoned by propaganda. That their concern is that Russia has been putting out millions of documents into the search and into the ether, and that the models are getting trained on it. They're starting to sort of come up with things as answers, and again, like you say, if we could just freaking sort things out so that we can all get along and focus on
Yeah.
what's better for everybody as opposed to what's better for your one little chunk of this planet, it would be
Yep.
amazing.
Yeah, and I think one solution to that is the
Mm.
obvious thing that we spoke about earlier on, and that's to start removing the thought of the model giving you the information, and to
Mm.
start thinking of the model as being an engine of understanding
Engine
your
of
own
understanding.
information.
Okay. All right.
Right, because yes, somebody could poison the model with propaganda, and it's not limited to Eastern societies. It's, I think
No,
it also
no,
happens in
absolutely. No,
every
no, no.
society,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that kind of stuff. And then so the whole idea is like, don't ask the model for an answer.
Mm.
Ask the model to help you reason through the information that you have to
Mm.
help you come up with an answer.
So the
I think,
critical critical thinking skills then are going to become even more important with this stuff rather than
exactly.
letting the models do them for you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Interesting. Wow,
So
that's
if you outsource your brain to the model, you're vulnerable to misinformation from the model, be that
mm,
hallucination or be it poisoned by misinformation.
mm,
But if you don't outsource your brains to it, but you use them as a tool, then you're less vulnerable to that.
mm. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay. All right. See if the what other. Are you okay for some more questions? You're good with these?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Let's go.
What do we got here? Okay. So Phoenix Sterling. Boy, some great usernames
These are
again.
great
Yeah.
names.
For
I'm
someone
going
who
to use these
uses
as
AI
characters in my
daily
books.
and is passionate about the field, but who wants to learn more about machine learning, coding, and NLP, where would you recommend starting, Laurence Moroney?
I promise I did not plant Phoenix Sterling,
Yeah.
but I think one
Perhaps a
place that
Coursera course or a book
perhaps a
or.
Coursera
Yeah.
course. I mean, if you don't know Python coding, I would
Mm,
say let's start learning with a little bit of Python
mm,
coding. And then once you've got some Python, then there are some great courses out there. I teach some, other people teach some. There is one really fun little course. I'm trying to remember what I called it. I think it was Google AI for Anyone.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and it's free and it's on YouTube. It was about
Okay.
10 videos on YouTube. It's probably on the TensorFlow channel.
Oh, I think
Um,
I think you were a burn and learn for me. I think I was actually watching that on a burn and learn. Okay, all right.
nice.
Yeah, yeah, all right.
Yeah, so I
Sorry,
think
burn alert. That's
that
when I
would be
exercise while I'm watching something to my brain and my body at the same time. You
ah.
see? Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, wow. No,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
So I think that that would be one, and it's free, because you can
Right.
just watch it on YouTube. And then if you get bitten by the bug, there's I did teach a TensorFlow specialization on Coursera,
Mm-hmm.
and then that kind of takes it to the next level where you can do things like computer vision, natural language processing, and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And yeah, those would be the ones that I'd recommend.
What do you? I'm curious to know what Phoenix is looking to do with it. Because again, I guess it's going to be specific to how you. What is
Yeah,
where are you trying to use these models?
yeah.
I'm just going to go back, make sure there's no more questions. Oh, there we go. No, is that right? Have I got? I think we got through our questions. Let me just go check the.
Hey,
I'll check the chat. Thank you so much for this, Lawrence. I can't believe. I'm sorry, I've kept you for
anytime.
like we're an hour and 45 in. So if you need to,
No,
you
I'm
need to
having
bail,
fun.
then let us know.
It's either this or the day job.
Oh, really? Well, that's a good question for you. What is the day job? So, what is a day? What is a day in a life of a director of artificial intelligence? What do you do?
A lot of it right now is planning.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of planning as we're spinning up teams to be able to build some of the stuff that I spoke about earlier on.
Mm,
And and then to just A is planning and B is reviewing.
right.
So it's eventually we'll be in the much more of an execution phase. We're beginning to turn into that right now.
Mm,
But yeah, so I would say my mornings at the moment are generally filled with meetings because I work with a lot of people in the UK,
right.
and with time difference and all that kind of stuff. And then my afternoons are the when I'm kind of actually able to work on some stuff and execute.
Right.
But there's no rule of like this day looks like this. There's no day in the life of yet. So it's
You still doing a
we'll
lot of
see.
outreach and that kind of
Uh,
stuff?
yes, not as much.
Mm,
I think there will right now a lot of the outreach is much more about advisory around like what to do, what not to do, how to deal with hype, how to deal with the hype cycle, how
mm,
to understand how to make the right decisions about what the kind of infrastructure, AI infrastructure you're going to put into your business and that
mm.
kind of thing. And then as like new frameworks or new stacks that I was talking about earlier on come out, then I'm sure there'll be a lot more outreach in them around here's how you build XYZ using
Mm.
it. That's a future task.
And you would I mean how do you balance your work life with your your writing of science fiction and stuff? Is that I mean do you find is it all a chore or is it do you relax to write? I mean,
I think I'm relaxed to write, and
mm,
it's kind of funny that I've just finished writing the novel that I mentioned. It
mm.
took me about 4 months to write it, but most of the novel was written on. You're not going to believe this, but my son plays ice hockey,
Oh yeah.
and I would go with him to his ice hockey games, but we'd get to his game about an hour beforehand so he could warm up and change and all
Mm,
that kind of
mm,
stuff.
mm.
And I would just sit in a room, like beside the rink and write. And so the vast majority of this
Yeah.
novel was written in those like 1 hour windows
Because you can
while I
focus
was
too.
doing
You can.
that.
It's the
Yeah.
there's no distractions of home. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
smart.
Plug on the headphones, get
Yeah,
into flow state and just write
yeah.
and try not to, be distracted by editing or anything
Mm,
like that. Just blurt the whole thing out. And then a lot of, at least for me, for writing is like a lot of it you think ahead of time about what's going to be in the thing,
mm.
and then the moment of writing is just execution.
Right,
So
right.
then there's downtime, like while you're in the shower or whatever, when you're kind of thinking of these things, or if you
Mm.
can't sleep, you're thinking of these things. And then by the time you get to the keyboard, you can sit down and in an hour, you can write like a couple of thousand words
Wow.
because all of the stuff has been thought about ahead of time. So it's like that's generally how I've been using time for that kind of stuff.
Wow, good for you. Well, that's amazing. That's I'm very jealous. Jim the Evo, who I said before. So James Gurney specializes in phages at the University of Georgia. As a professor there, and just a wonderful guy. Has done a number of scripts and stuff for Kurzgesagt. The In a Nutshell, those wonderful animated
Oh
science
yeah.
things. If you haven't, they're amazing. And he's saying, do you have any interest in working on predicting phage virus host range from genomes? Ho, ho, ho.
I can't even pronounce that.
But this is the thing.
Sorry.
But this is where I get excited
Yeah.
about it because I go like, this
Yeah.
is where someone, like, I mean, to be fair, Jim is pretty. I mean, Jim has done. It was very good at our studio and R and Python and stuff. Anyways, but if someone wants to like, so someone like Jim is at university wants to do something that is beyond his time or perhaps
right.
programming skill, what is the best way to approach that? Are there communities that you can go to for this kind of stuff or anything? I mean, if they're not, there should be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It would be the first answer, but I think how I would approach something like this personally would
Hmm.
be that, first of all, is to unlearn what I already know
Hmm.
about the thing and to try and boil it down to the most basic thing.
Hmm.
So if I use a diabetic retinopathy as an example, was like, if I knew how to look at a retina to be able to detect blood clots, then I'm already on rails to being able to interpret retinas in a particular way.
Hmm.
And like, let me take myself off those rails, let me unlearn all of that and boil it down to the basic thing of there be some patterns in here that tell me something. Right.
Right, okay. There be
And
patterns.
there
Right. I
be
got it. Okay.
patterns in
Right. Got it.
here. And
Got
it's
it.
like, how do I kind of, if I can program a computer to say, like, okay, these ones are in this class, these ones are in this class, I've no clue why. You go figure it out.
Hmm.
And I think, and when you can get into that kind of level, so I don't know what it would be in phages and virology and
Hmm.
all of that kind of stuff, what that would look like. But if there are certain, things where like, okay, I've got a whole bunch of stuff here and I know that some of these are in this class and some of these are in this class, then I start thinking in those ways to make new discoveries. But
Hmm.
I don't know enough about the field to have an educated opinion.
Hmm.
But generally, I find that kind of level of decomposing down to the simplest possible thing is then how you can get a computer to do it. The same way
Hmm.
as like when you're writing code, right? You don't ask a computer to draw a space invader on the screen. You ask, you get it down to the simplest
Baby
possible
steps.
thing. It's
Yeah.
like these
Yeah.
pixels, and it's the same way. It's like to kind of try to decompose any problem like that down to the simplest possible thing, and then try to think about how the computer could then do that. And that's the beginning of then an intelligent solution, and therefore an artificially
Hmm.
intelligent solution.
Boy,
I
that's
always
great.
define artificial intelligence as programming a computer to react to data in the way a thinking being would,
Hmm.
right? So like if my dog sees a picture of a cat, he goes woof, right?
Hmm.
But if a computer sees a picture of a cat right now, it just sees pixels.
Right. Oh.
So how do you program a computer to see not just see pixels, but actually see a cat and react, that kind of
Hmm.
thing? So that's the idea of artificial intelligence.
Right. That's amazing. I mean, the idea of mixing this stuff with biology is extraordinary to me
Yeah,
too.
I would love
Because
to learn more.
yeah, oh, the phage stuff is
Gurney,
fascinating.
Gurney,
I saw James
James Gurney, you
Gurney.
said?
I originally
Okay.
saw James Gurney online. He was a friend of Q's, another friend of mine, and he was doing student videos about his love of viruses
Oh wow.
while he was studying at university, and he's and but so the phages, if I understand it correctly, are basically viruses that attack bacteria. So they're very
Okay.
useful when it comes to things like bacteria resistant, as what are they called? Antibiotic resistant
Okay.
bugs that basically, of course, is going to be a big issue.
Interesting.
I
Are
probably
you
just
seeing the
butchered
sci-fi
everything.
connection here?
What was that?
I'm seeing the sci-fi connection here, right? We got Q, we got Gurney Halleck.
Oh, I know. It's so true, isn't it? Yeah,
I
that's
know
like
what's going on.
we're living in a
This is great.
simulation.
I know
Yeah.
things are all
Anyone got
bleeding
any
into
other
each other.
questions before I let poor Laurence go back to his real life? Brimstone was saying it's worth pointing out that DeepSeek and the newer models are a mixture of experts, MOE
Yep.
models. So in other
Yep.
words, they're stepping on this. They're on the shoulders of giants to some extent. Is that what's happening?
Yeah,
Or?
that's one extent, and it's one of the innovations with the mixture of experts model. If I kind of try to break it down, is if you think about the what I've been calling the God models, right? Who've got these
Mm,
hundreds of billions of parameters
mm.
that they're generalized to be able to do anything.
Is that like
Yeah,
ChatGPT or something like that? That's
yeah.
a God model.
ChatGPT
Okay,
is
right. Okay,
GPT, Anthropic,
okay,
Google's Gemini, stuff like that.
right.
Anything over like 100 or 200 billion parameters of you're getting into God model space.
Right, right.
The idea of a mixture of experts is like, well, instead of having this one big nebulous mass that's generalized and being able to know anything,
Mm,
what if we have this one little thing that's an expert on code, and
mm,
this one that's an expert on biology, and this one that's an expert on creative writing,
mm,
and have all of these little experts be a part of the model.
mm,
So then when the model is doing a prediction that based on the thing that it's trying to predict, that it routes it through this mixture of experts to get a
mm.
better answer.
Right.
So
That's
it's
the
one of those
all-knowing
little
God model.
innovations.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's the God model with his minions,
Right, right,
that
right.
kind of thing. And then each of these minions are like experts in a particular thing. So it's an innovation out there to try and make God models even more godlike.
Hmm.
So, and that's one of the things DeepSeek has done as well, is the mixture of experts, as the commentator pointed out.
The other thing that we didn't sort of go into, which is the is agents.
Agents,
What's the difference with
Mr.
agents?
Anderson.
They scare me a little bit
So
because I feel like that's one of those ones you write a program and it goes wrong and ends up spending all your money on Pokemon cards because it found out how to buy them or something. You know what I mean? Like how does what's the deal on that?
So agents are just a logical extension to the large language models that we've been talking about,
Mm,
where the idea is like agents, typically you have a session with the large language models, you ask it a thing and it gives you an answer.
right.
But what about then, like based on the answer that it gave you, that you could make another decision, or
Mm,
you could trigger a workflow? And then what if you can orchestrate all of these together,
mm,
to be able to add value? So let me give one example that I've seen agents being used for, which is really cool. Is that if you're a salesperson for a company,
mm.
and before you do a sales call, typically you got to do like work. You
Right.
got to do research work
Right.
into
Right.
the
Yeah.
background of
Yeah.
the person. You got to look at the company. You got to do all of these kind of things,
Right.
and then that involves you doing a lot of stuff which is not directly related to your job as a
Mm,
salesperson.
mm,
It's auxiliary to the job. It's necessary auxiliary, but it's not. You're not selling at this point. You're
mm,
reading,
mm.
right? And then if you think about it, all of the loops that you have to jump through sometimes to find information,
Yeah.
right? Register on this site to give them your email to get this document, and
Mm,
all of this friction that's between you and doing your job.
mm.
That's the idea now of an agent, where if you were to write code to do this kind of thing, it would be really infeasible to kind of
Right.
cover every corner
Yeah.
case.
If this,
But
then that would be very
yeah,
difficult to map out. Right. Right.
exactly.
Yep.
But now, so if you have an agent, and again, I'm back to artificial understanding. Now it's like, okay, the agents, to get it to go to LinkedIn, to find the person, to find their connections, to download details about this person and their connections, or
Mm,
maybe some of the posts that they've made, and to summarize that for you,
mm.
or to visit a website. And then, every website is different. The contact me button is in different places, the about us buttons in different places. But like, a large language model to visit the website, download the website, artificially understand the content of that website,
Mm.
to know where to navigate to next, like for example the about me page,
Oh,
to then
wow.
visit that, to download that, to artificially understand stuff that's in
Oh
there,
my
that goes,
God.
oh, they have this blog, to then go visit the blog and download stuff and summarize that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all of this kind of intelligent decision making that would usually be a cognitive load on you as a human,
Mm,
to actually, it's still if then code, but it's
mm.
very intelligent if then code, because a large language model can understand the stuff
Right.
that it's downloading, or artificially understand the stuff that it's
Yeah.
downloading,
Oh
and
my
parse
God. I
that and make
love that.
decisions and workflows. That's what agents are really all about.
Well, and that's
Now,
that's 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 the I'm a genius issue. Like I've always got a million different links that I need, and like looking you up, you've got like one what you've got your website, you've got your LinkedIn,
yeah,
you've got your speaker one, you've got like there's so many things to look
yeah.
at. That's oh, I like that.
Right. So that to me is the excitement of agents. And all it
Mm,
is it's large language models being orchestrated by traditional code.
mm,
And then sometimes these large language models have a feedback loop on themselves. Like,
mm,
it generates a thing, and then I don't understand that thing, so just regenerate the thing.
mm,
That's
mm,
a
mm.
lot of those kind of things. And that's reflection. But to me, that's the excitement of agents, is it's really bringing the power of large language models and AI into the workplace. And I
Yeah.
see it as them acting on workflows instead of acting on data.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
think about the workflow that you have as a human to be able to do a thing. And
Mm,
it's not just a salesperson, it's anything, like you said, preparing a podcast. It's,
mm.
for me, writing a book, a lot of it was, I built a chatbot to chat about my own book and about my own characters, but I could easily build an agent to kind of go and search for stuff on the web about good story structure, and, have a
Yeah.
chat with the chatbot about,
And then tell you
as he
off when
is
you get
he
it
is he
wrong.
using
Yeah.
this story structure exactly, and so that, and to me, that's the idea of agents. I think what's become overhyped is when agents then interface with things outside,
Yeah. That's the
like
concern,
like
isn't it?
your Pokemon card
Yeah,
scenario
it's
or
as
something
soon
like
as they're
that.
released, make sure you put five of them in my basket and buy them before anyone else can. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but you would have to explicitly build the agent for that,
Mm-hmm.
to buy Pokemon cards. The
Well, and people
bug would
do.
be that.
People do.
Oh
There's
yeah,
there's definitely. I mean, that's the
yeah,
sneaker thing too, where people were basically bots that do all this stuff for
So,
them.
so I have to tell you a funny story about that. Is I'm going on a cruise in Asia in September,
Oh,
so Korea and Japan,
oh, fantastic.
and I'm so excited. And a friend of my wife on what was the reason? Oh, Valentine's Day.
Mm.
She
Oh,
called my wife
that.
up and said, "Yeah, that," and she said, "Oh, the cruise line are actually doing a sale on Valentine's Day, and because we booked relatively recently, they will price match."
Mm.
And then so my wife called the agency and got a price match, and we saved like a few $100s on our cruise. So we really thank our friend for that. But then it was like she said, like apparently they do it every holiday.
Oh,
So now my friend is visiting this cruise line's website like every time there's something even remotely like a holiday
right.
to see if they will discount it again, to call and get the price match and all that kind of
Oh
stuff. And I
my
was like,
God, that's
holy
good.
crap, that's a job for an agent.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. I could spin up a simple agent to go visit this website,
Mm.
and has the website changed since yesterday?
Mm.
Right. That's memory of the agent.
Mm.
Has it changed since yesterday? If it has changed since yesterday, to parse it, to see, to artificially understand the
Mm.
content of the site, to see if there's a discount, and if there is, to trigger an alert to me so I
Mm.
can call them and see if they'll price match.
I love
You
that
know,
stuff.
those little kind of
Mm.
things, and I think that's where agents are going to start coming into everyday usage
Mm.
for people, and you're
And
going to see it being
scraping the
built into
data
their
you need,
phone. And
just the data you need. And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. The,
Wow.
the difficult part of that today is understanding the content of a website with
Mm.
traditional code, doing all the if then. But
Mm.
I know
Also, what's the impetus
flogging a dead horse now. But
sorry, go.
sorry,
No, no,
I'm
it's
saying
just,
flogging a dead horse here, but to artificially understand it for you then
right,
opens
right.
up all these scenarios.
No, I guess my concern with not my concern, but like something we've got to figure out is what is going to be the compensation for people who create that data, right? Like who's going to, if someone can have their blog summarized and put on an AI somewhere, why write the blog? We've got to figure out a way to, I don't know about monetize, but certainly make it worthwhile for people to still be creating their own content stuff. Because one of my concerns that I've had with, well, even with Google's a perfect example. With Google search has suddenly become about just little blurbs about what you're looking at, so you don't need to go to the site anymore. But
Yeah.
how do we want to be careful that in this push to make things more efficient and all, that we don't lose the very source of, we don't kill the golden goose,
Yeah.
along the way.
Yeah.
Because if people aren't incentivized to create content and put original stuff out there, we got nothing to feed off, basically. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge challenge. I have a lot of thoughts on that, but I don't think we have time to go over that
yeah,
now.
I'd love to.
But
I'd love to talk about that. Well,
right,
look, Laurence, this has been amazing. If I'm going to have to get you back on again because frankly, there's too
please.
much to talk about.
Oh, please.
What is the best way? Not necessarily for people to bother you, but what would you like people to? Where would you like people to go? We'll put links in the
Oh no, it's
description
no
and stuff.
bother at all. If people have any questions, just my email,
Yeah,
lmoroney@gmail.com.
right. Yeah.
Just stick that in there, and
That's
my
what I do
Twitter and my
too.
LinkedIn. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Get
good.
back to you when you can. Yeah.
I try to answer everything. I certainly try to answer all the polite ones,
Right.
that kind of thing. But yeah, just feel free to reach out and email, and I'll do my best to answer.
That's fantastic. Look, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody for being here. We had almost 100 people watching
Nice.
today, which is fantastic. I'm not surprised really because this really is. I mean, I think everyone needs to sort of do an AI audit, don't they, and figure out where
Oh
they
yeah,
fit in the
yeah,
in the scheme of this stuff because it can be exciting or terrifying, and let's just hope we start using it for the right
yep,
reasons.
yeah. It's going to be a bit of both, and if we have the right people at the steering wheel, it'll be more exciting and less
Right.
terrifying. And I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the
that'd be
key.
nice.
Right. Yeah.
My favorite comedy piece right now is "There's a horse in a hospital." That's how this comedian is describing the state of American politics right now. It's a horse. It doesn't know why it's there. Nobody knows what it's gonna do because it's a horse. Anyways, look, thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing. When do we see your next AI book? We've got your new
So
novel is out. Is it out? Is
yeah.
it available now?
No, so my novel is finished, and I'm looking for an agent to try and get
Okay.
it in front of a publisher. I'm chatting with a couple of agents next week, but I'd like to find somebody who can get this traditionally published.
Okay. Very good.
My AI book, it's called AI and Machine Learning for Coders in PyTorch, is finished, is in the post-production process at the moment. I think they're saying it should be on bookshelves in May.
Really?
So yeah, looking forward to that. It's
Well,
got
if
a
you've
really
got any,
cool
if you
cover
need
with an
someone to look
eagle.
over
Oh
a
yeah,
pre
yeah.
version or something,
Please, I'm happy to send it to you.
and you got the animal on the front.
I got the animal on the
What is
front. I
it?
got it.
Is it a
It's
gecko?
called a hob. It's a hobby on the front of this one,
Hobby.
which is
Yeah.
kind of like a small eagle.
Oh, is that
The
I saw
previous,
one with a lizard of some sort on it.
yeah, that was my TensorFlow book.
That's
Had
a
like a
TensorFlow.
kind
Okay,
of cool
right,
lizard on it.
right.
Yeah,
Is
but the
that the
new
one I've
one
got?
now.
That's probably why it's ringing a bell
Yes,
for me.
that's
Okay,
probably
all
the one
right,
that
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
got. And then my second book had a bird on it that looked like John Cleese, and that's probably why the book didn't sell very well.
A
And then now
bird that
this
looked
one,
like John
it looks like
Cleese.
John Cleese. Yeah,
I'm
go
gonna
go
have to
look it
look
up.
at
It's
that
called
again. Is
AI
it
and
here?
Machine Learning for On-Device Development.
Yeah. Oh,
I
that's
might have a
right.
copy of it
I've got
around
it.
here somewhere.
It's in the garage. It's too freaking cold here again. It was +10. It's now -8.
Oh no.
Forget
Yes,
about
it's
it.
good. It's a bird with a big mustache. I thought it looked like John Cleese. And,
And so it's the Department of Silly Birds.
exactly. It's even doing a silly walk. And
All
yeah,
right,
so this
fantastic. All
should
right,
be out in May.
so definitely we need to check that out. So we've got sci-fi to read, we've got real science to read,
Yep.
and again, thank you, Laurence, so much. Anything you want to say
My
before we
pleasure.
wrap it up?
No, just always a huge thank you, David. This has been amazing fun, and thanks to everybody for listening. And if you still like me after this one, let's do another one.
Please. All right, everyone, be brave, be kind, be brilliant, and until we geek again, I will say cheerio.